So this is going to be very casual, and it will have a meta of the mechanics, as we kind of play through. None of you have any experience with the 5-minute RPG. Is that correct?
100%.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through. We're going to create some characters, and then we're going to do an encounter. And, there are at least going to be some things where I'm going to say, here's how it is now. I don't know how it works, or here's what I'm going for, or write 2 things down, that sort of stuff. Does everyone have a sheet of paper and a pen?
See.
I have a pencil.
Beautiful. Awesome. So the way that we're going to start is we'll go ahead and create our characters. So in the 5-minute RPG, the idea is you should be able to sit down and play a game of this in 5 minutes, even if you're starting from scratch creating a character. So the first thing you're going to do is draw boxes or circles similar to a standard 5e character sheet on your piece of paper that's blank. Now, the character sheet that'll be provided will have this stuff, but the idea is make sure you draw the square or the circle large enough for a quarter to fit in it, roughly. Quarter, or like something about that size. So wherever you want on your paper. And then I want you to write the standard 6 ability scores next to it. And I will read those off to you so you don't have to memorize them. So does that make sense so far?
So like one circle for each one, or just
correct?
One circle?
Basically, you're drawing your own character sheet right now. Right? So you're going to just create either a big circle or a big square. That's about the size of very similar to a 5e character sheet. And if I would have had a little more time, I would have said, hey, here goes a quick handout. But basically, you're just going to make your own little character sheet, and then we're going to generate ability scores. But they need to be a little bit larger than just large enough to write a number in, if that makes sense. All right. So strength, dex, con, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. Okay. Now, I assume everyone has a full set of dice. Is that correct? With 2 d10s?
Yep.
All right. So here's how you generate ability scores in the 5-minute RPG. I want you to take the d20. That is called the story die. I want you to set it aside. Now, you should be left with 2 d10s, a d6, a d8, a d4, and a d12, your standard set. Place those dice in the boxes, and those are your ability scores. So you literally take the d4 and you set it on whatever you want your d4 score to be, okay? It is lower is worse, higher is better. So if you find yourself as a intelligence-based superhero, you'd want to put your d12 in that ability score. You're going to be rolling that die when it comes to challenges and tests tied to that ability. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that is how we do character creation very quickly, is you take the dice, you take the story die and set it aside, and then you literally just do, you set your dice wherever you want them in the boxes. Okay? Now, I'm going to teach you the basics of how the game works. So we'll continue character creation in a moment, but what I want to do is make sure that you guys kind of get the gist of what are these dice for? How do I use them? And that sort of thing. Okay. So right now we're just calling them tests, where if I ask you to roll something, here's what you do. You take the story die, the d20, and then you take whatever ability score it is. So if everybody rolled a strength check right now, grab your d20, grab your strength die, roll them together. Okay. Here is how things happen in this game. You get to spend those points, and here is the simple economy. This never changes. This is always how it is. 5, failure, but something interesting happens. 10, success at a cost. 15 is just flat success. And a 20 is success with a benefit. So in general, it's 5, 10, 15, and 20. And so if you are, let's say you wanted to make an intelligence check to try to open up a mainframe on a computer, you'd roll the story die, which is the D20, plus your ability die. You'd roll those together. And then based on what you get, you have 5, 10, 15, or 20. Now you can spend that however you want. And let's talk about how we're sort of designing the game. Don't think of the world as being creatures with hit points. Think of it as being successes and failures. And this is what I really want to try to dial in tonight. So the idea is, if you come upon let's use the mainframe as an example, I might say, okay, this mainframe is a 1 success mainframe. That means that you need to get 1 success before you get 1 failure. Okay, so the idea would be, on that economy, if you rolled low, you could say, well, I have to take success at a cost because we need the success. Or if you rolled very high, you could take success with the benefit. Okay. But the idea is that this is supposed to be an economy. And what we're going to dial into is that it basically lets people hopefully do cool stuff every turn. And it's kind of like a risk reward thing that should be very simple. So initially speaking, that is the high level concept of the game. Quick stat gen by putting the dice in the boxes. You roll a D20 with the dice, and then you spend those points to do cool stuff. That's before classes, weapons, any of that stuff. So 2 things. 1, do you have any questions? And then 2, how does that hit you initially as far as the system and your feel for it?
No questions. I really love the die placement. It took me about 30 seconds to figure out what I wanted to do.
Boom. Awesome. And that's what we've been hearing, is that the character creation is just so simple, because it's just okay, I'm done. And that's the math. It's already done for you.
And so the success and failure is dependent on us role-playing the success or failure.
Right. So sort of. So the idea is that now I'll talk to you about how we're going to set things up. The goal of this game is to be a quick play party style RPG at the surface that could also be easily dialed in to be a rules light system that you could run a campaign in. And so the way that we're going to set it up is, instead of you having to dream up an encounter like in D&D where you have to come up with everything, giving you a basic framework, which is everything is called a scene. And in the scene, it's a number of successes before you get a number of failures. So the average, you have to get 5 successes before you get 3 failures. So this is one of the things we have to kind of figure out is, do we split it up so that if you're a hero saving a child, that is 1 success, and if you fail, something happens. But the main concept is, when you are prepping a 5-minute RPG game, you're creating something that we'll call it like the doom track or the conflict track, so that every time a failure happens, something specific is a consequence. An example I was using when I was talking to James the other day is, if you're in a room that's flooding, that is the scene. But at the first failure, a wall breaks and more water starts pouring in. In the second failure, another thing happens. And in a third failure, a final thing happens. So the scene happens with or without you in a lot of ways. And then you have to react or interact and get those successes to mitigate and role play and so on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the idea is that hopefully it'll be easy to prep so that if it's like, hey, you know, the orcs are throwing someone into the volcano, as a DM, you say, okay, phase 1, you know, they'll do this. Phase 2, they'll do this. And then phase 3 or failure 3, they throw the person into the volcano. Right. And so the idea is playtesting that so that it also feels good enough and intuitive enough, and so that it doesn't happen too quickly or take too long. And so that's what we kind of have to figure out tonight. But does that answer your question,
So,
Michael?
Yeah, well, kind of. Would a harder scene be more successes for more failures, or is
Correct?
And so just like an average. I guess for me, I was kind of thinking, well, okay, if I wanted to do something as a wizard, I want to throw a firebolt as a first level guy.
Sure.
But in 5-minute RPG, if I succeeded with a benefit, then I could just say, oh well, first, third, fifth level don't matter because I'm role playing my success now, and so I could, I could do a fireball as opposed to a firebolt just because I want to introduce my success with the benefit. I mean,
sure, that's fair. That's a fair question. Yeah. So
is that levels aren't as important. It's more about the success or failure. Is that correct?
Yes. And we would like to work in, and this is where the class comes in. So we would like to work in a level of narrative. So put it this way. Yes, that's true. But a game master would say, yeah, but you didn't roll well enough. You would need to roll a 20 to do a fireball at this point. Does that make sense? So we want to make it so that at the surface, it would be like, hey, I'm a wizard. I'm doing this crazy thing. So you want to play it with your family on a Friday night so that you don't have to learn firebolt versus fireball, but that there's enough of a like core skeleton in there that it's very easy to hack and say, here's where that would come into play. Okay. So here is and I'll kind of, because that's a really good question. And I think it's going to be an ongoing answer as we sort of play, but let me explain classes to you guys. And I think that this is the newest thing so far. So forgive the wet paint, but to create your character after you place the dice, you choose your I am a blank. In this case, all three of you probably would say I am a superhero. Okay. Now, here's what that does. Your I am a, specifically in this case, is going to give you some sort of high-level narrative ability so that if you can convince me that what you're doing fits within the role of a superhero, you can gain some benefits. So to take it a step further, because that would not be specific enough. I am a superhero. That's like, well, we're all the same thing. So here's the idea. I'll use a ninja as an example. I am a ninja. And then from there, what you would choose after you choose your I am a, you choose your specialty. So I am a ninja swordmaster. Okay. Now what that allows you to do is, so I am a superhero with magnetic powers. I am a blank with blank, or who can do blank, that sort of thing. The reason why we're trying to go this direction is because you could literally play a sports themed game with this. I am a quarterback with a rocket arm. So you could play a sports RPG. You could play a Transformers RPG. I am an Autobot who transforms into a truck, or something like that, and kind of dialing it in. Now the idea from this is same scale, and this is where the firebolt versus fireball comes into play. We're trying to figure out a system where it's the same scale, 5, 10, 15, and 20. And when you use one of your powers, okay, we'll call them, and you say, I'm a wizard. I want to cast a spell. I'm going to cast a fire spell. Okay, roll for it. Now you get to spend the points to see how well the spell did. 5, 10, 15, or 20. So a wizard would probably roll intelligence, and then you'd roll that. So go ahead and roll me, just for fun, roll me any die plus a d20, and we'll call it an intelligence roll. And then give me the score, whatever you roll. Oh, I think you're muted.
16.
A 16. So that's a success on the success meter. So I can say, okay, you got a success. Tell me what that fire spell looks like. But to answer your question, kind of hearkening back to before, unless something really special happens, it still only counts as one success. And that's why the narration can be big and bombastic and crazy, and you can do all that stuff, because at a high level, it's similar to narrating a wicked cool attack move, and you still just roll your damage die and it does the damage. That doesn't mean the damage does more. Does that make sense? So it's kind of cool because you can have this crazy scene where you shoot the biggest fireball ever, but it still gives you one success. Does that all make sense?
Yep.
All right. So what I was going to say is if that, because this is all wet cement, the I am a, and then the specialty, I did a test with a ninja and it seemed to work pretty well. The core concept is if what you're trying to do will allow you to act like a superhero with such and such powers, then I'm like, yeah, go for it. And then you can roll on that separate pool of power stuff. The problem or the challenge is right now, it still feels very similar to just doing normally. So why would you use powers if you could just roll an intelligence check and do the same thing? And so we have to figure out what differentiates those two things so that you can feel awesome like a wizard or a superhero. So yeah, I guess we could go around again. Any questions so far, or any playtester comments on how that feels, or if it makes sense?
It feels very loose, very high level right now. You've already pointed out what I was going to point out, which is being a superhero with a certain type of power. Rolling a check doesn't feel any different than if I was a janitor rolling the same check.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Right. And that's what I really want to try to figure out is how do you still feel like a cool druid or whatever, Captain America, you know, without exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay. So I don't know that answer yet, but I like the idea, and you tell me, I like the idea that if we can dial in this character creation method where it's I am a blank who specializes in blank, then what we would do is we would have roll tables in the book that would specifically give you examples. So if you rolled Swordmaster, it would give you some sample special moves and things like that. So that you're not just like, okay, I'm a Swordmaster. It would say things like, and all of this stuff too, we plan on putting on cards so that you could just pass out cards very quickly for character creation. So you pull, it's like ninja, samurai, ronin, whatever would be at the top. And then at the bottom, it would be Swordmaster, general, whatever. But then it would have some very cool, simplified sort of ideas for what that specialty could do for you. So if it was, you know, if, for instance, if you were, you had fire powers, you would have little cues that would be like, you know, Nova, you know, attack all enemies in a certain range, or, you know, things of that nature. But the idea is that, because the design isn't there yet, but here's the concept. Here's what I'm trying to imagine. You're sitting down, you got your sort of chatty family, you just had dinner, everyone wants to play a game, you want to play an RPG. You're like, hey guys, check this out. You pass out these character sheets. Everyone puts the dice on. And even a step further, we were thinking of having like pre-printed, like larger sort of like cardstock things that actually have like dotted lines of like, hey, yeah, this would be the ninja card. Just put the 4 here, the 8 here, the 7, you know, sort of like pre-gens, but you hand those things out and then everybody draws a card and you're like, okay, cool. Here I am. I'm a ninja who specializes in X, and you could just get playing in seriously in 5 minutes. So there would be different card sets. There would be the superhero card set or the zombie apocalypse card set. And that stuff would all be just boop, pop it out and you just flip a few cards, put some dice on a character sheet, and you're off and going telling a story. So I just want to know if that sounds attractive to you. That's kind of the design goal. And then you could hack it from there and make it a little more crunchy.
Is there you said spend the points, so could you choose to not spend points for your success, and then you have somewhere that they spill over that's where you'd spend them instead of using them on your success?
Sure. So right now, after the first playtest, what we did is we had two ideas. One idea is a pool that is for the table. So if you have extra points and you're like, oh man, let's bank this for later. And we'll call it special move, whatever it is. You can bank 5 points into the table pool. And then essentially, if someone needs them later and it's a really dire situation, it's like a 2-to-1 ratio. You have to bank 10 points to get 5. But if you're like, oh man, I got 5 points left, I'll take success at a cost and let's bank them. So that when you have the boss fight, you could use like, oh man, we really need, the timer has 10 seconds left. We need to defuse the bomb, use the table pool. And then you get to roll and also use those. Does that make sense? That was one idea for banking them, because it really, in the playtest, it had this really interesting camaraderie sort of build, because people were banking and spending, and it was this very two-way sort of role play. It was really interesting. The other idea was that every class should have something called a fiver. That it's like, you can just do a thing that costs 5 points and it's awesome. So that if you end up with 5 extra points, the medic can throw a stim pack to somebody, or the druid can cast, something like that, where it's like a fiver where you can just do cool stuff so that people always feel useful on their turns. So those were kind of the ideas. But again, the design's not there yet. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, in that case, you could even store it up. You have multiples of 5 and have something higher levels. And then maybe if they, how does, not that it probably impact this game as much, but you said for campaign wise, you have like a leveling idea involved.
So yeah, we have a few ideas knocking around. So our thought process for that was, if we come up with the core system and character creation at a base level, like really just the bones of this thing, it's like, wow, this feels great and this is easy. It'd be easy to scale it up. Does that make sense? So like, find something that works really well and then scale it up from there. So that's kind of the plan. So the other concept was, because we want to also keep it super easy. I got some flack from a few people who were like, you shouldn't be designing an RPG for your mom. Like, that's stupid. But at the same time, the reason why I say that is because my mom is the denominator of people who never would play an RPG. So I'm like, I want to say, hey, look, mom, check this out, but make it so that it's streamlined enough. An example I would use is a really well-designed smartphone. In the hands of almost anyone, they're like, oh, this button, and they push the home button, and what does it do? Oh, they push an app. They just push with their thumb because it's intuitive. If I can make it that, then we can always make it more complex with a couple extra rules in the book. You know what I mean? I can always make it easier to hack. But if the core structure is just this fun and run and gun sort of thing, I think it could have a lot of mileage. Any thoughts and feedback so far?
Well, something that just pops into my head, and it could be off track and you can ignore it, or it could be the greatest thing you've heard and you want to steal it.
Sure.
In terms of the different levels of, I'll say powers, just since we're talking, but I think this is something that could work as a template, and it mirrors your economy of 5, 10, 15, 20. It makes me think of video games where you have, name the video game, Diablo, old school, Marvel versus Capcom, whatever. You have a light attack, a medium attack, a heavy attack, and a special ability. And depending on how well you roll on that success, you could then, as you were talking about having these, these roll tables or suggestions, you could have those 4 tiers of, all right, well, I want to use my special ability, but that means I'm going to have to bank some points. It's that power meter filling up. So it's going to take you a couple of turns to, I'm really trying to get my top level power.
Yeah.
And you're trying to hold things off and hoping that your allies are going to help out. Or you're the guy that's just trying to do the thing that's going to, you're fighting off the minions. So you're just going to keep using these 5ers. So you're just going to, maybe you're not rolling as well. So you're just, whatever. There's a million uses for it. But that was, as you were kind of talking through it, that's kind of what popped into my head is this idea of the light, medium, heavy, and special attack.
No, I think that's great, man. I think that's a really good idea.
And that special attack that you're talking about could have X number of successes to trigger, right? Is that what you're kind of saying, Jacob?
Well, I'm saying it's like that would be your high level thing, and maybe it costs 20 to do it. So you might have to roll, say you roll a couple of 10s and 15s, and you have to just say, well, I rolled a 15, but I'm going to take the success at a cost so I can bank 5 toward my special ability. Boom, the power meter just went. But then, in the same way that in these video games, you do something that sucks the power meter away, or if you have a really bad failure, maybe it causes your power meter to drain. That's kind of where my head's at on that. I'm not trying to, change or complicate your system.
No, I love that. No, man, listen, that's what this is for.
Yeah, that's just kind of like, because I see IAMA and the specialty, and that's this in my head. That's a general idea moving towards a template type approach. And then you could almost have these overlays for the different archetypes that say, well, here's some ideas for what these attacks might be, or maybe it's narrative control that it's a light attack, so it's not gonna use a super duper power. It's gonna So anyway, that's just kind of my thoughts on that.
I love the power meter effect that you described. Chad, I saw you on mute. I wanted you to be able to give your thought.
I wanted to piggyback off of that, and you could have like your personal meter as well as like a party meter. So you have like, okay, am I going to save the points to the party, or am I going to use the points on my own meter? So you could build up your own special power selfishly, or maybe not selfishly. Maybe it's a super healing power. So it's not selfishly.
Sure.
But or you could donate to the party. Also, to piggyback off that, I'll let you go because I'm going to try to think of my thought again.
Sure. And so I love the idea of the dual meters. And then I love the idea because, Jake, something that you introduced that is a new concept that I hadn't considered was building it up like a power meter. That works better. We had discussed, and I sort of like roughed out a druid. We had discussed, okay, here's the druid's 5, here's their 10, here's their 15, and here's their 20. And what became interesting was it was like kind of trying to squeeze in, call it 10 levels of play into a tiny little 5 powers or 4 powers. But I like your idea better. And if we have a meter, that gives the DM or the GM or the 5M, it gives them the power to say, okay, cool, this is your ultimate, so I'll allow it, like narrate. And so it can be a little more general rather than, my 5er is wild shape. It could be your 5er is, so we'll call it like forest touched. And then there's a very brief description. It says things like wild shape, simple spells, speaking with animals. And so there's like examples of what a 5 does, not here's the one thing it does. It's more like, and so I love that it's a power level because then you could bank it. And the 20 is, Avatar of the Wood. And it's like, you can do things like lift 50 trees, whatever it is. And then that way it's very narrative. So I think that's actually a really good idea that kind of is a missing piece of the puzzle to kind of link it all together.
And it should be narratively big because it's not something that everybody's going to do, and it's not something that is going to happen very often, especially if these are, I don't see it as being something that everybody's going to hit their ultimate every scene.
Sure.
Because
I love that.
And I think what balances that is this whole structure you have of an economy, because you're constantly thinking of the cost and where you're putting that. And you're going to have players that are going to be the ones that want to hold on and try to save up for that big power. And then you're going to have players that meter never rises because as soon as they get the little 5, they're like, boom, boom, boom,
Pew,
boom.
pew, 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 pew. Yeah.
Well, and I love that kind of works into your janitor example, right? The janitor could be fighting next to Captain America, and the janitor on all of his successes can only do like these 5ers, whereas Captain America can pull out his big 20 or whatever.
Yeah, that solves that problem. Whereas NPCs or normals, whatever you want to call them, they don't have that exactly. They don't have that track they can fill up. So it's like when you choose a class. I'm kind of high level calling a class both the IAMA and the specialty. But when you choose your class, it sort of unlocks your track. And so I think that actually could work really well because I think I don't want to muddy the waters, but I wanted to throw out a couple other ideas that go with the IAMA and the specialty to, again, give you just enough where you feel like you're playing a unique character and not just the same as the person next to you. So the other thing that comes with the IAMA is you become skilled. Okay. Now, I was thinking of doing it sort of like a lot of RPGs where your IAMA has 2 or 3 that are linked with it. These are basically your favored stats. So if you were to choose I am a ninja, you can be skilled at either Dex or say Constitution. What that means is, and this is kind of playing off the economy, and this is the high level idea. What that means is if you're skilled in something, it's not going to be like a lot of RPGs where it just means you get it automatically all the time. It's sort of a save your bacon thing where you can take a cost to roll sort of with advantage. So if you really need that, it's like, no, I'm a ninja. I can pull it out. So even when I fail, I can roll that again. And yeah, I drop my sword, but I still dodge the poison dart sort of thing. So the idea is that your IAMA comes with a skill. So your superhero comes with, and it could be wide open, where you just give players, you choose any one of the 6 stats that you can do this for. Maybe leave it that wide open. So that's the first thing. But again, got to work that into the economy. Like, figure out, okay, is that the right way where it costs a failure, or whatever, figure that economy. But I love the idea that it's very simple, but it makes me feel like, no, I'm the strong one. So if I really need to, I can re-roll this and it costs something. So I wasn't sure too if I wanted to link a cost to it, but I also didn't want you to just be able to use it all the time where you're like, oh, I never fail a strength test. So think about that for a minute. And then with your specialty comes equipment. And so I thought it'd be really cool. And this was before the power leveling idea. Thought it'd be really cool if you got like a magic item and it can do different stuff at 5, 10, 15, and 20. But I thought it'd be really kind of cool for gear. So like a gun. It's like, let's just use an M16. You have burst fire, which might be like 10, but then you could have like full auto, which is 20. And it does different stuff. I thought that would be cool. So the principle we were kind of working with is unless an item is a special item, it doesn't act any differently. So meaning I could be like, oh, I use my gun. And it's like, okay, cool. Give me a dex roll. Unless it's a great gun or you're really good with guns. So a character who, and that simplifies so that you don't have to have proficiencies and all that stuff. Does that make sense? Jake got me in the chat in a non-live game.
I know Chad and I were probably both. I looked down to see if he was shaking his head too. You got two Army vets in here as you're talking about fully auto 116s.
Is that just way wrong?
No, it's not way wrong. They're modifiable, but I know what you were going for.
I guess the original was, but
yeah, the M16A1 had full auto, but
of course that's what I was talking about.
and the A4.
No, what you meant was with a M203 grenade launcher attached to it.
That's right. And actually, you know what? That's actually a really good example of what like a 20 would be, which is if you had a grenade launcher on your gun, you could use it. And I just love that kind of concept where it's like, you don't just have, it's like, yeah, I'm the Punisher. And it's like, okay, cool. But what makes you the Punisher? Well, check out this gear. Look at this gun I got. And it kind of makes it to where you want to collect different equipment, because I think it would be cool if a Swordmaster didn't just have the same sword all the time. It's got this fun little side thing to kind of roll on where it's like, no, this is a specific sword, or this is a broadsword, or this, you know, and it doesn't have to be too complex, but I just loved the idea of it being able to do little stuff. So that would be encapsulated. That would be character creation. Put the dice down, figuring out kind of what that is. And this might not be the order, but put the dice down. I am a, okay, which also gives you your skill, which is kind of like the thing you can reroll. And then your specialty gets you access to gear. Okay. The I am a also is probably what would give you your power track, I think. I am a druid, and it gives you your druid stuff. So I guess if you wanted a D&D term it, your I am a is your class and your specialty is your subclass, kind of. But if you do it right, you could make it so they're super mix and matchable and not like prerequisites, but it's like you could be a this, and you know, that kind of thing. So how's that all sound just at a gut level?
One comment is I can't help but follow up. I am a who can. I think the skill is a who can. And so your I am a is your superhero who can. That just anyways.
No, I'll put it here. I love that kind of stuff because I do agree with that.
And the cool thing about having the role determine what you can do. I mean, so playing 5e, I think the thought process, at least for me, is that okay, I've got a bunch of goblins. I'm going to pick one, and I'm going to swing my sword at it. Let's see if I roll or if I succeed. Whereas what it sounds like here, it's like, okay, I've got the bad guys in front of me. Let's roll. I super succeed, and so now I have the option of attacking 10 of them as opposed to just the one I wanted to.
Correct.
It kind of flips the way of engaging with the scene.
Yes. And that is by design.
Cool.
The first thing I thought of when you mentioned the equipment having different levels of stuff is it, and this isn't in any way an indictment of it. If anything, I think it's a endorsement. It reminds me of the leveling abilities of items and powers in 4th edition D&D.
Oh, yeah. That's a great point.
I started out DMing in 4th edition, and right off the bat, I was trying to homebrew magic items for the party, and it was so complicated because you had to have things that it did at this level, but at this level, it opened up and could do this, and at this level, and there were all these contingency things where a magic item wasn't just it casts light and it does radiant damage. It did certain things once a day, and it had certain things it could do at will, but if you strip away the complexity of that at its core, you had a multifunction magic item.
Yes.
That's the first thing I thought of when you mentioned this idea that you have multifunction equipment, and I really like that.
Yeah, I think it could be pretty versatile if we do it right.
I don't miss it at all as a DM in terms of the 4th edition complexity.
And I think that the system is already pre-built for stripping away the complexity in that it's like, no, you roll. Did you get it? Okay, then you can do it. Like if you have enough points, you can use it kind of thing. So it's kind of like, it's less of the once a day and every so feet. And it's like, we're trying to keep it very narrative. So I love what you're saying. And everything doesn't have to be symmetrical. So a piece of gear would be multifunction. A weapon could have different attacks. And a magic item could be a mixture of the two. And none of that has to be the law. So if I have this warhammer, I could use it for climbing because the way that it is. And so it's kind of cool where it's like we can just be really flexible with it, where some things are going to be, no, this attack is just more sword. Like this is a grenade launcher. But then other things are, this is a grappling hook. Oh, it's also a, this, or it's a rope you can use. It's stuff like that. So I love the idea of having a gear card that you can kind of just explore and be like, oh, what can I use? So cool. I'm glad that hit you that way. So any other thoughts about character creations or classes? Because I think what we should try to do now is, and we'll do it in tandem, is everyone kind of makes their I am a, and then honestly, during the game, we can just come up with 5, 10, 15, and 20s. Like if you I want to just kind of feel that out. That's one of the reasons why I wanted you to invent your concept first, is because I want to stress test the idea of the mechanics. And if I can say, oh, cool, look how easily this all fits, then great. But if we come up with a bunch of one-offs or things that don't work, it's like, all right, well, how do we reinvent the wheel here? So you've all placed your ability scores. Now I am and this is where it's going to take some more play testing and practice as well, because is it I am a vigilante superhero, or is it I am a superhero who is, my specialty is gun-toting vigilante, that sort of thing. In this case, we have, it's a supers game. So there's going to be, most people are going to play superhero. But in a game like D&D or a fantasy setting, you would have a variety of stuff. So I want to make sure it's separate enough that we don't go so high concept where it's like, I'm an adventurer. It's like, well, yeah, so is everybody else. So it's kind of like, I am a, and so that's what we'll figure out. So do you guys have your IAMAs?
I just put superhero.
That's perfect. It's great. And you could also,
hero.
Perfect. And you can get as descriptive as you want. Like, what's the word I'm looking for? Tortured. I'm a tortured superhero. Like, that's where people can get as detailed as they want there. What about you, Michael?
I am a superhero who can sense and control air molecules. Perfect.
And that's pretty narrative, but I love the idea that it was that quick. You don't have to go, all right, I got to make all my cantrips. It's like, no, we're up and running. You're Magneto or you're Batman. And so dialing in what that means and making sure the mechanics hold, I think we'll have something really magical.
Well, and what I love about, and maybe this is superhero specific, I don't know, because I have to admit that most of my role playing is in fantasy, so I'm very comfortable in I am an elf who can shoot a bow, but by picking just an ability, now I can say, well, what does that ability do? And I can, as a creative person, think about all of the different ways I could use that ability. But then again, it could kind of feed into what you're saying about gear, maybe the abilities I can do, the spreading apart of air molecules, or the pushing of a smelly fart or something could be one of those special abilities.
Well, that's very comic book too. I mean, how many times in the comic books are superheroes just suddenly discovering they have new abilities, or under extreme duress, they're suddenly like, oh, I can do this thing now.
Yeah.
Or usually that's because a different writer's taken over. But,
right.
But if it fits in the 5, 10, 15, 20, right, it gives the player the choice, the freedom to just do it. And Yeah, it's the 5, 10, 15, 20 that kind of creates the boundaries, maybe.
Sure. And I think that could work really well because it's also, whether you understand RPGs or not, the idea of 5, 10, 15, 20 being a power level or something, people get that at a core level. It's like, oh, cool, I want to do my... So even a new GM could say, it's about a 10. I'll let you do that. That's about a 10. Because it's just between 5 and 20, where 20 is the highest. So you have a little stair step. So I like that. So yeah, and you make a good point about the fantasy stuff. Where again, that's where players are always creative and they'll stun me. Like I'll be like, oh wow, that's a really good way to do it. We should do it like that.
This is actually my first time ever playing a super.
Oh, cool. It's very cool.
Ditto.
So you guys, so he is a superhero who can control air molecules. What about you, Jake? You are a superhero. What's your specialty?
I am a superhero who can manipulate light.
Oh, I love that. All right, and then Chad?
I am an anti-hero who can absorb kinetic energy and use it to either redirect it or grow.
Love it. So a real good mix. And again, so I'm playing with 3 RPG players. That's why the cards are going to have samples and examples. So if you hand this to your brother-in-law who doesn't play RPGs, he's not like, what do you mean I can control air molecules? So I suffocate people? Yeah, you can suffocate people. That's actually a really good idea. Let's write that down. But also, here are some ideas of what you can do on your turn or stuff like that, and kind of finding a balance of that. So that it's not so high concept, because that's one of the things that I think for me, I'm not a fan of in Fate, is that it's so narrow in some ways that it's like the con man's always looking for a con. He's trying to con the monster, that sort of thing. It's like, I want to avoid that. So people can just kind of play, but okay, cool. I think what we can do is just jump in. As far as your equipment or your skill, if you want to choose a skill, which means any one of your abilities, if you get into a pinch, at a cost, you can re-roll your ability die. So you keep the D20 roll and you re-roll the ability die. So you choose any one of those that makes sense to you. And then if you come up with a good, this is what we did during the first play test. I was like, look, if you can come up with a good piece of equipment that makes sense, like in the moment, you're like, oh, I also have a ray gun because that's my guy. I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Let's figure out the ray gun. So you could just narrate like whatever you do. So here is where, and I'll ask straight out, here is where I want the economy to be fun. I don't want it to be too long, and I don't want it to be too short. So a scene should be about the length of a D&D encounter. And what I mean by that is 20, 30 minutes or less is kind of what I'm thinking. And then if you want to do more, you can do more. So when you start a scene, I have in my head, you need to get 5 successes before 3 failures. But I don't know, and we'll try it now. I don't know if it should just be like, yeah, standard scene, 5 successes before 3 failures. Because there's only 3 of you. So I also don't know if I should break it up where disabling the turret is a success, and this is a success, and this is a success, or if it's just that narrative where it's like, nope, just get 5 successes, just narrate, here's the bad stuff that's happening, stop it, mitigate it. If you fail, the scene ends and you lose and you go to the next scene. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm trying to figure out that.
Maybe you shouldn't tell us how many successes and failures it takes. And then
we shouldn't tell you?
You as like the 5M shouldn't. Maybe you shouldn't. Maybe you should keep it blind.
Cool. That's actually a good idea.
Succeed and fail, and
like a monster's hit point. So it's always more tension.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a simple, really wise thing, because in my head, I'm just like, yeah, just tell them. But you're right. It's cooler if it's like, you don't know.
It's kind of that balance. Some GMs tell players the DC, the target DC, like ICRPG's room DC.
Oh, yeah.
Versus not telling a monster's AC or a monster or a scene or skill challenges DC. A lot of that comes down to trust, I think.
Sure. Yeah, agreed.
But I think I actually agree with Chad on this, that makes a lot of sense. Like the default setting should be keep the success failure challenge a secret. Yeah. Or if maybe it's one of those things like, or for beginning players, or maybe it works better for your group. If you want to, you can tell that, but or maybe the sidebar is to add extra tension. Don't tell the players the skill challenge kind of thing. So I kind of like that blind, going in blind.
Yeah, I think that should be the default. And then the sidebar would be, hey, if you're playing blah, 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 show them if you want to, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Because that does automatically like, okay, cool. That you're like, oh man, how bad is it? You just don't know.
And you can do things that narratively, as a GM, I think it gives you some freedom to narratively make things seem worse than they are, with dramatic pauses and things like that, that they're not sure. There's going to be a point where they think they're really failing and maybe that was it.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Oh yeah, we totally got this.
Right.
And the wall crashes in and the entire ocean is now flooding into the room.
Right.
And you realize, oh crap, we don't have this and we got to get this now.
I love that. Okay. Very cool. I love that. So go ahead.
Can the fail with a cost actually reset some of the successes? Is that?
Yeah. So we had thought about that. So, okay. And then vice versa, when you, succeed with a benefit, it could mitigate a failure. It was the idea. And I didn't know if we can try that. Let's try that. So I'm going to keep two separate tracks, one where we do that. So you're able to do that. But I also want to track the math of what happens if that wasn't allowed. So play with it as though that works. And then,
what about, oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
What if you can just use from that pool that you had, that meter that you had before? What if it's just also shareable that you could take from that to make a success? As long as, I guess you'd have to have either your party's consent. If it's from the party one, maybe you could only do that from your own. I don't know.
Sure. And that's it, is figuring that out. So let's try some of that stuff. And it's okay if we do like, okay, take 2, try that rolling this, or take 3, try that rolling this, or how does this feel? And kind of working some stuff out. And so what we're going to play is actually the scene. So it's a scene from a comic book. And before I wrote tabletop RPGs, I wrote comic books for about 7 years. None of them ever saw the light of day, but I have tons of plot lines and even full finished scripts. I even have one like movie script, but I had a full working universe, a full comic universe. And so we're going to play a scene from one of the first issues. And so it will be as narrative as you guys want. But again, like I said, I'll break immersion and sort of ask questions or direct, but we can absolutely have a blast with this. And so, Jake, what city are you in?
My real city?
Your real city?
Hastings.
Hastings. Why don't you want to set it there?
Sure.
All right, cool. Oh, Siri wants to know about. It's interesting.
That just happened to me in a game the other day.
Did it? It was like, ta-dum.
It was kind of embarrassing because whatever I said triggered her to say something, and she said, "What can I do for you, my lord?" Because like 5 years ago, I told her to call me my lord. And the players are like, what?
What can I do for you, my lord?
Yeah.
I love that so much. So it'll be in Hastings. I'll put this stuff in the chat. And then could you just remind me of your hero names?
I am Prism.
Love it.
Mine's Vibe.
I'm Temper.
Perfect. So there's been a massive disturbance in Hastings. And the good news is that although this is probably the largest disturbance, the news reports, the bedlam that's being reported here, although it's probably the largest you've seen in 5 years, the good news is that the most powerful hero in the world, Versal, is also reported to be there fighting the threat. And so you are going to join Versal. And you've heard, you know, tales of Versal. Maybe some of you have even seen him in person. It's sort of like, imagine if Thor had brunette hair and a sword instead of a hammer situation. Just your iconic sort of Superman character. And so Versal is already there, but the threat has not stopped and it continues. And so Hastings is a mishmash of rubble and smoke as you approach.
Vibe is very poorly jumping very high in the air with a push and a braking on the other side as he lands, but half the time he just kind of pops up and then sometimes he crashes in the ground. Still figuring out the whole flying thing.
Prism shows up on a solar-powered motorcycle. Electric.
I love you so much.
And does one of those in a rubble pile kind of. There's no revving of the engine or anything. He just comes up and skids it into the rubble, shooting rubble up, putting one foot down, and taking off his sunglasses as he looks around.
Yeah. And I see, so like I'm seeing the side shot, right? So it's a profile and it's just and next to it you just see like pop, 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 pop. So sort of like this Avenger side shot. And so Chad, what is Temper doing as a motorcycle screeches up, pushing this rubble, and is like a pop, pop.
There's like a drone. It's a large drone, and he's flying in, hanging on it. 1 foot hooked in the loop and hanging on, and then he jumps off, and where he lands, it cracks, and he finishes off his energy drink, and he crushes it, and then he pounds his chest, and he's ready to go.
Oh my God, this guy is me IRL. All right. So as you see the up close carnage of Hastings, it's the smell that hits you first. Definitely burning buildings, embers, smoke, soot, but also the smell of burning flesh. And you hear faint Doppler screams sort of all around, and the fires that are here are creating thick plumes of smoke, so it's difficult to see. But a figure comes out of the smoke and and falls at your motorcycle. And give me either an intelligence or wisdom check, Jake.
So that's a D20 plus the relevant die.
Yes.
All right, so that's going to be a D10. 11 on the 24 on the other, so 15 total.
Perfect. So just to give you a kind of meta description here, if there's not a success or failure that would affect the scene, the idea was to do standard sort of skill checks where just norms like 5, 10, 15, 20, where 20 is awesome and 5 is the worst. So a 15 would be like, oh, great. So you see that this is actually Versal's sidekick, sort of his Robin to Versal's Batman. I never named him. So do you guys want to give him a name for this game? It's okay. It's okay. I just want to throw it out.
Superheroes are not my forte.
No. You're good.
What's
You're good.
Versal's power?
Versal is sort of a Superman situation. So he's got your classic flight, super strength, that sort of stuff.
Boomer.
Done. Okay, so it's Boomer, and Boomer comes crawling, and his costume's in tatters. You could see that he's beaten, he's bruised, his face is swollen, and he can barely talk. We have to save Versal.
I at first instinctively almost go to punch him just because of a past. But I stop back and then I go to actually lift up. Was he underneath or he's
sort of crawl. He sort of fell out of the smoke that at the chopper. So he's in front of this glistening solar powered motorcycle and his reflection in it just marred.
I'd go to try to help him up.
Yeah, and you do. And he's sort of, and it's worse than he looked, as the smoke starts to clear. And as you can see in the amber firelight, it's sort of masking the blood because of the color of the fire, but he is just in bad shape. And he looks you in the eyes and he looks at all of you and he just says, we have to save. And before you can even have him finish his sentence, something grabs him back into the smoke.
Vibe attempts to clear the smoke around by pushing out the soot.
Awesome. So that seems to me in this sort of that seems pretty standard. So let's make that what do you think, a 5 or a 10?
A 10.
All right, let's do a 10.
Okay. And
I'm also thinking just thinking out loud, maybe powers are only 10, 15, 20. Because if you can do it, there's no need to roll. If it's something that's super simple, nah, that's not even something you need to roll for, do it. So, but in this case, yeah, it's a 10.
Okay. And I've selected my intelligence as a 10.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, it seems like an intelligence roll. I guess it's a spell. 18.
Okay, killer. So you're able to do that. Now, here's where that means it's a 10. That means you have 8 points left. This is where you could bank them.
Okay.
And so we want to keep the math fairly simple. So I'm thinking check boxes where you just exit off rather than adding 5, 8, 7. It's no, if you have 5, you check it off, the rest go away.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Just super simple. So go ahead and mark down on your sheet. You can either bank one for you or you can bank one for the table.
And do I have to choose, or should I choose now?
I think it's important to choose at the moment because I like that gambling aspect.
Okay. I think Vibe is a little stingy and definitely not knowing what's going on. He's a little kind of freaked out. So I think he's going to take it for himself.
Awesome. Jake, would you be willing to track for the table if anyone banks any for the table?
Yes.
And just bank them in, X's that represents 5. I don't know what the conversion is, but I want it to be more expensive than 1-to-1. So I don't know what it is, if it's 3-to-1 or whatever, but basically you have to bank double maybe to get 1. So you'd have to bank 2 to get 1 for the table. So I don't know. Just track them all, and then eventually, when someone wants to use those, we'll have to talk that through.
So I can actually show you what might actually work. Is that right now I'm working off the idea of a 2-to-1. So
Yeah.
I drew boxes 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, and 40 with like an arrow that points up to another set of boxes. So that we would have to bank 10 points to have that. Once those 2 are filled, boom, that's a point we can actually use as the party.
Love it.
So just that, I'll send you a screenshot after the game.
Yeah, that's killer.
So I will track party pool.
Love that. And so what you see is you are able to clear that. And so the smoke goes and clears away, and you are able to see Boomer being dragged, something very quick. So the smoke sort of clears, and the thing that you would take note of the most is the horror in his eyes as he's sort of being dragged away. And you can see that it's humanoid, but it's that sort of silhouetted like black, even against the smoke and the fire. You can't tell what it is, but it's a humanoid, muscled humanoid figure.
How far has he been drugged so far?
Far, like something moving at great speeds, like pulling him at super speed. Not flash fast, but like not a normal person just dragging him, but like let's say if like a Magneto came in and just started flying backward. So pretty quick.
I'm gonna at least try to run after him.
Sure.
At least try.
Awesome. So here's where I would probably call for some sort of dex or con, like if you're going to do like a long distance run or something. So I'll let you choose, but you can sort of run after him, just straight on run. So yeah, go ahead and roll and let me know what you get.
A 12.
Okay, so a 12. So in this economy, that would mean that, and here's where it gets interesting, because you can either it's basically success at a cost, or you can just bank. So, and that's where I have to figure out, like, okay, well, what does that mean? Should I let people bank? Maybe you can only bank 5 at a time. Maybe that's the rule. Because I don't want people taking a turn and going, no, I'm just going to bank it. And then they're like, within 3 turns, they're like, all right, and now I level the city.
I immediately like the idea of you can only bank 5 at a time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's do that. Let me put that here in my notes.
So then I want to be able to bank any, right? Because I need 10 to succeed, and I'd only have 2 left over. Correct.
And that's where I want to find. Yeah, exactly.
But then if I fail, I put 10 in there. Like if I don't do it, then I succeed. Oh, you're saying we can only put a maximum of 5, so I can put 5.
You can either You can either spend it on successes, but if you had, let's say you rolled a 20, you can bank 5, or you can spend all 20.
And even my 12 is a success at a cost, right? Because I only qualify for a 10.
Correct.
Chance, I gotta go and try and be a hero, so I'm gonna go with the success with a cost.
Awesome. So we want to have narrative tools that give you ideas. And Michael, this is something you even mentioned at AtCon. Ideas for what that cost is, because I don't want to put the weight of that on the GM. If costs are going to be coming up that much, I don't want it to be like, and your shoelace breaks, where they're having to come up with stuff. So that's where the scene itself, when you're prepping, I think it's a cool thing. You tell me. The cost might not be evident to you right then, but I don't like that in one way. In one way, it's cool, but in another way, I don't like that you missing this guy makes something else bad happen somewhere else. That feels cheap. So I also thought maybe that there could be at a cost for the hero. Like something, because you know your character better than anyone else. So you come up with 4 things that might be a cost to you. I don't know. I want to make sure that there's something narrative that we give people. I don't know what it is yet. Because right now I'm like, okay, I have to come up with a cost. What is it? You trip? It's not very heroic. You know? So it's like, I got to figure out what that looks like. Or, yeah, I don't know. Do you have any ideas of what the cost would be?
I think that it would at least be an extent of whatever I did. So whatever test I did, I should have some kind of debuff in that kind of category. So maybe if I go to use that one again, the next time I go to use that one, because I should be kind of like fatigued. I exerted myself to try to save him at a cost.
And I do like that.
Kind of drawback.
What I would want to do is figure out a way to track that so that I want to make sure we're not tracking so much stuff, but I love that idea. So I don't know how to signify that. Because now you're playing, now you have to, and I have to remember that you have Dex next turn, he has Strength next turn. So I love the idea. I want to make sure we can implement it simply. And so maybe the cost is just narrative. So, give you an example. What if the cost is, as you are running by, you have to choose. You are within reach, but you falter because you see a civilian hanging from a burning building. So what if the cost isn't always a thing, but sometimes it's a choice? Because I love it when games are like, yeah, choose A or B. That's some of my best memories in games is when a game master gives me a dilemma. So what if the cost is not always A or B? It's, here the cost is you either succeed, but the cost is do you decide to not save the person?
You could have a meter for that based on how many times the party overall fails or individual fails.
Sure, and the scene fails is something I definitely am tracking, but that's where I also don't know how to make that. Because right now, if I make your failure catching this guy fail against the scene, it could tick off the party. Because now the scene got worse because you screwed up. But I don't know. What do you think?
But that's how it should work, isn't it?
I think so. I just need to find the economy of...
If we're taking individual turns, then, think of the conflict in any movie or TV show, comic book, whatever it is, whether you're talking superheroes or not, somebody inevitably makes a choice that either really messes things up or makes things good happen, but they made a wrong choice.
It's very true.
There was a cost involved. Maybe their decision is what caused the failure. So I think you absolutely should have our individual, what we do count towards those scene successes or failures.
Okay.
Otherwise,
that's a very good point.
Otherwise, you're going to have to track it. You're gonna potentially triple, quadruple, or quintuple your scenes, because then you're going to have to base it on round. You're going to have to track of the 3, 4, 5 players, how many succeeded and failed. So what's the net success or failure?
Right.
And then put that towards the scene.
Yeah.
Maybe that's an option, for a more complex or campaign base, but I really think if you base it on individual successes or failures, it should be within our power as individuals working together to cause the scene to succeed or fail.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea. And I think you're right. And I think my fear was that people wouldn't do stuff. But I think that that's where it comes into making the economy work. So yes, do what you're saying. And then I need to figure out what the baseline is for how many failures should mitigate or make a scene get worse.
What do you mean by wouldn't do stuff? Like they would just...
He wouldn't have tried to reach the guy or run after him because he doesn't want to fail and add to the fails of the scene. So he would just let him get pulled into the.
Could that then,
Well,
the
if,
lack of doing anything, then be considered a failure?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe it's like, okay, so you're automatically going to fail. You don't do anything.
what
You
if
know what I
since
mean?
I
So
didn't
maybe-
technically fail, it doesn't count to the fail, but the next time I try to do that check, the dice that I roll is the next dice smaller.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So like going down in dice. So here's something else I was thinking of. I don't want to make it too complex, but if you have a box that counts as failures, I thought it could be really cool if instead of just immediately checking off a box, same thing with successes, but I don't want it to get too long. You draw one line of an X. So it's 5 and 3. So so it's like you draw one line of an X, and the next success is the other line of an X. Okay, that's one success. So then if you succeed, you draw one line in the X. If someone else does, they draw the other. So that way, if I say, oh, you fail or you succeeded at cost, you still get the guy, but then you draw one line of an X. It's not a full fail, but you're slowly ticking the boxes. Does that make sense?
It immediately makes me think of keeping score in bowling.
There you go. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I almost want to
All right,
incorporate.
come on, guys. We got to pick up the spare.
I almost want to have a D6 setting somewhere and tick that off, as opposed to some box. But I don't know.
Sure. And that's honestly, as long as the mechanic is so, meaning if it means 3 failures are each composed of 2 each, then that is a 6. So like we could totally be like, hey, or you could drag it with the die, as long as the math shakes out. It feels good now. Let's try that. Because what I don't want is for the successes and failures to go too long. But I also don't want them to be so short to where it's like if you guys take one turn and all 3 of you just happen to mathematically fail, the scene's over. Like, so it's kind of like, oh no. So let's do that where it basically, that should track out. Because we did a playtest in a pulp setting. It was like Matt, Tila, Barker, James, Cassie, Heather. We all just, and I just ran it. And there were a lot of successes, but we found that it felt good because in a group that big, you don't want to go around a whole round robin and then have a crap turn. So it's kind of like that. So let's try that. So I'm going to keep track of the successes and failures out here. So do you think that it is too high of a cost if I make you narrate something bad that happens, or if I throw something bad that happens and also strike against you against the scene? Is that too much?
I'm not sure I'm following. You're giving us the.
So what I'm saying is, let's
failure.
say, yeah, so he did success at a cost. So if let's say this scene is 5 successes before you get 3 failures. He just tried to catch that guy. It didn't work. Maybe it's a choice. You either narrate something bad that happens, or I mark one of the lines of the X. Am I making sense? Does that sound weird?
And one of the lines of the X is the X of the failure.
Sorry, the failures.
Half a failure.
Right. So the
Or
idea is that,
narrate.
like, here's an example of what I'm talking about. So if the scene looks like this, I'll just put it in here. Let's say these are the failures, right? 3 little lines. What I'm saying is when you get one wrong or one bad thing, I add this. And then when you do it again, that becomes this. I'm essentially doubling the number of failures you get. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Does that make sense? Rather than just putting an X there.
If you're going to do that, Tim, then why not just make it 10 successes before 6 failures?
I don't have a good reason.
I mean, because really at this point, all you're doing is doubling the number of failures. What this looks like to me is on paper is you are already scared that we're going to fail the scene that we just started. So you're trying to make us have more chances to not fail.
That, yes. And I want to make sure that small failures like this don't have wide effects.
Success at a cost. Okay. See, to me, that 10, that success at a cost seems to be the only real sticking point.
So what if it was this something like it's a success and I can either take the failure or I could like remove one of my skill dice from their box. And so I don't get to use that skill dice, the extra dice the cost is my choice of degrading my hero. And if I want to add some narration to that, I can, or the GM, the 5M can if they want.
Sure.
So,
and I think that the thing that I might be overthinking is because everything you're saying, everything everyone is saying is really good. What I'm worried about is in 5e, if you miss a monster, it's not something that costs you. The cost was you missed the monster. So kind of what you're saying, Jake, like success at a cost, it's like, meaning if I miss, I miss, but if I hit, I hit. And so I want to make sure that it's not taxed too heavily where it's like, oh, I missed the monster and I dropped my sword and I don't have strength. Does that make sense? So it's kind of like maybe I'm just thinking too far into it and it should just be sheer narrative like D&D status, but instead of a crit fail where you narrate the character tripping, I just put a little bit of mustard on it. So I'm like, oh man, so yeah, you don't do it and you barely, he is pulled out of reach. And as he's pulled into the smoke, you can see that, something, perhaps your costume has been singed or so you have something like that.
I think,
I'm not sure.
So, but if you fail, it's a full X, right? So if you get a success with that cost, it's only a half.
Well, and that's honestly, look, I don't know. That got kind of convoluted because I was like what Jake was saying. We'll just call it a full X and skip the lines because, like he's saying, why not just make 10 versus 6 or 5? I guess at a high level, what I'm saying is maybe there's a flaw in a certain number of successes before a certain number of failures in a scene overall. Or maybe there are certain things that are key factors to the scene, and that's what the meter is for. The rest is just interacting with the world. Like, not everything in D&D has hit points. Does that make sense?
What I'm kind of getting hung up on right now is the word success with a cost. And so to me, he succeeded, but something bad happened. So he grabbed the boomer, but the beast, Temper and Boomer are so strong that they ripped a leg off or something.
Right. Stuff like that. Where that's the kind of stuff that narratively was the idea. And it worked really well in Seattle when we did the playtest. Cause it would be like, okay, so yeah, so you fire off your gun. So you get success, but the cost is that was the last bullet. And that was like a good example. Or you're able to reroute the wiring and you are able to close the bay door, but the shields on that section of the outside of the ship go down.
So 2 things.
Sure.
One, I've already forgotten. I don't know what just happened. So, I had 2 points on that. Okay. So take it up to its highest level. Success at a cost and failure are both okay. I know what the other thing was. Success at a cost and failure are both failures against the scene. However, as you said, and I think this is key, not every action in a scene necessarily would cause the scene to fail.
Gotcha.
So I think part of that you're going to have to figure out possibly through this, but also just kind of figuring out is what are the guidelines for the types of things that can affect the scene. Maybe there's a template that a scene has key points to it. Kind of going back to your earlier thing, the room's filling with water. If a certain thing doesn't happen, then more leaks spring is a failure. You know, what are the things that happen, the narrative elements that are the failures, kind of thing? Because just chasing after this guy, to me, doesn't, I mean, I don't know what the scene is, but it seems like his failure to catch Boomer, or success at catching Boomer, but at a cost, is a little too trite to be an overall failure for the scene.
I feel the same way.
So I think that might be what the dilemma is. In terms of the economy, I think you've got 2 success options and 2 failure options.
Right.
Regardless. And then it's just a matter of determining, the sticky point is, figuring out what counts towards the scene and what just is in action.
Right. Yeah. And I think that kind of and I think we both touched on this language, which is, we could even call it something like, keys to the scene. So it's like, well, this is a key piece. So as an example, a key piece to this scene could be anything related to the thing you're fighting, anything related to, say, let's say that there's a family in a burning building, and then there could be some other thing. So if you fail in any of those regards, then things happen badly.
I just wrote in the chat, plot points, using the scene, using that scene terminology. Maybe that's kind of what you're trying to hit on.
Yep, exactly. It's like if you do something specific to the plot, it's got more consequences. Because like you said, in the story, the person always makes the bad choice, and then everyone's like, why would you do that? Why did you just lie? And then that causes tons of pain, versus that person doing something innocuous. Like if they're flipping a coin and drop it, yeah, it's a failure, but it's not a narrative key point. It's not a plot point, right? Exactly.
Why would Victor Crumb catch the golden snitch, yet Bulgaria would still lose the Wizarding World Cup? Sorry, deep cut.
That is perfect.
All right. So you want to keep trying to play this out a little bit?
Let's go ahead and play it out. Thank you guys for talking.
I think at this point, I like the idea that this is one of those things where we don't know what our plot points and what are what's affecting the success failure of the scene and what's not. So
yes,
that's still on you. Because I have a thing I kind of want to do once we see what happens. What's Temper's cost?
So I would say, to me, that Temper. So Temper, what kind of gear are you carrying?
He has a chain with a hammer medallion, and then he wears like a 3/4 sleeve unitard.
Do you have like a weapon or anything, or are you just your own weapon?
The hammer can come off, and you can.
Okay, cool. So what I would say is, as you're running, and this is, I probably was overthinking it, because what I would do in a D&D game, to put it this way, as you're running and you're just running as fast as you can, and the ground is shaking, and you can see, as the smoke has been pushed aside, by vibe, and just it's kind of being pushed aside, and it's creating this clear path, and you're running, and you just see these hands being dragged further and further away from you. Your chain sort of gets a little loose, and it slides off. And so you sort of like stop just for half a second to affix it, and you don't lose much momentum, but in that time, you're able to just grab the fingertips of Boomer. And so you're holding on to him. Now give me a strength check.
$18.
18. All right, perfect. So in this economy, what are you going to do with that 18?
So I can only bank 5 or a
Yes.
maximum of 5.
A maximum of 5. Basically, you can bank 1 5er. So you can't bank 1 or 2. You can bank in increments of 5 and only 5.
Okay.
So 5, you can basically bank 1 little set of points.
Then I have to take the 15 success.
Perfect. And so you hold on to him, and you're holding on, and you're holding on, and he sort of, his eyes get wide, and you're left holding his arms.
So kind of while this is happening, we've got Vibe is, for some reason I picture him like the Flash going like this. Clearing the smoke out of the way. And Temper takes off running, and I grab my bike and I just kind of grab the handle, hit the throttle as I'm throwing my leg over, and it does that kind of finishing out that skid. I started to take off through this clear path toward where Temper is. I'm racing on my bike as Temper is getting to Boomer and pulling, but I've got my eyes on this thing. And as I'm riding toward it, are there fires?
Oh, yeah.
Are visible all around?
Absolutely.
So
yeah.
I want to try to use my superpower, and because I can manipulate light. So
yeah, you can.
I'm going to try to pull the light off of the nearby flames, channel it into a light burst to try to blind this thing.
Love that.
So I've chosen Constitution as my ability tied to it takes a lot of fortitude to be able to channel this light through my body.
Love that.
So and I made that be a D10. So is that what I would roll then? Okay.
And then I would say that's about a 10 on the power scale.
I would question, and just in the terms of the play test.
Sure, yeah, please.
Would that be a 10 since I'm also controlling my bike? I'm trying to like steer
that's
through
a good
rubble.
Okay, let's make it a 15.
I'm pulling a Tim Carney and saying, you know what? I'm going to make this harder.
You are. No, yeah, let's do it. Let's make it a 15.
All right, so I got excited for a second because that's my my D10 with the 2 numbers on it. I was like, I got a 39. No, I got a 12.
All right, so a 12.
So that would be, if I don't bank anything, that's a success at a cost. No, that's a failure.
Right. So in this instance,
it's under the.
Correct. So what I would probably do is I would narrate and say, okay, you're able to muster your powers and you're able to control that. But, and so that's where the powers, my gut feeling is that a power should never, unless you do abysmally, should never fail. The effect should just not be exactly what you want it to be. Does that make sense? So it's like, so that you do that, but maybe it just sheds light on the creature rather than it blinding the creature because you got high enough.
I'm too focused on trying to navigate through this rubble on this bike, and I can't quite get the focus I need on the light coming off of these flames, which themselves are dancing and flickering and getting obscured by smoke. So I can only pull a fraction of the light, and instead of blinding it, like you said, it's just this almost like I become briefly like a low power flashlight on whatever this creature is.
You are, and your bike also is like glistening and sort of reflecting and all this. And so what you see is this humanoid figure in the light, cast on this light, hurls the carcass of Boomer aside. And you can see that it looks as though this thing may have killed Versal. Soaked in blood. But wait. Your light shines just enough to outshine the orange and the red and the flickering, and it's that hot white light that reveals true color and its clarity as the sun for just a second. And the creature sort of puts its hand up, but it can still see. And all of you would recognize immediately that this thing didn't kill Versal. This thing is Versal. Eyes glowing red, maddened by heat vision, and now Boomer's words echo in your mind, we have to save Versal. And he's there hulking his uniform in tatters, and just imagine as though it's like Superman, but with burning red eyes, and the S is ripped and the cape is tattered, and just, it's still the person. It still looks like a human, and he just sort of looks at you and then turns and flies into the smoke. And so quick aside here. This is the first scene of the comic book that is actually called Reversal. And it's about, they basically call in a supervillain because Superman goes crazy, essentially. So they call in his arch nemesis and basically say, hey, can you try to stop him? And so the whole first scene takes place, and it's a hero and a villain monologuing, but you realize at a turning point which one's the hero and which one's the villain. And then it's like, that's all revealed. Like, oh my God, wait, this is the guy. And then, he wins. And then they basically hire him and say, well, you've got to be the superhero now. And that's how you beat him, but and so that's kind of how the comic starts. So this is like a fanboy moment for me that you guys are fighting Versal.
So one thing that never came up, because we just kind of rolled into actions, is there an initiative system?
So there is. Here's how initiative works. Is you roll your dex plus the story die. Okay. Whoever gets the highest number goes first. And then you go in a circle. It's that easy. It's just boop. Okay, here's the initiative. Boom. So if you were to win, so it's designed for table play. But in this case, I would go in order of the stream. So for me, down at the bottom left, it's Chad, Jake, Mike. So whoever got first, I would just go from left to right. And that's it.
Without interrupting that flow, then I think we just kind of slipped into Mike, Chad, me initiative.
True.
Unless you want us to play out an initiative roll. I just realized, wait, we never rolled for any kind of initiative.
And you know what? It's funny you say that, because one of the things that I've done in my D&D games is I have actually sort of nixed initiative rolls, and it makes without getting too deep into it, it makes it feel way more brutal, because a character can get stabbed or you can kill someone without it being a stop, pause, let's do this. It's like, so I've been kind of tinkering with it in my Those That Remain game. I did a full combat where I would give them about 3 seconds, and if nobody spoke up, the bad guys would go again. And it was really cool, because then they would, and then I gave Matt, instead of a saving throw, I said, Matt, if you can narratively give me a reason why that would not hit you in 3, 2, 1. And I made him start explaining it to me before. It was just really cool. So the idea is I'm just in that mode. So I would call for initiative. So I think, do one, as you said, Jake, to kind of just play one out. I would love to just hear that and hear how it feels. So everyone just roll your dex plus. As an aside, on the character sheet, there's not going to be a separate box that says initiative.
Right.
There's going to be a little line next to your dex that says initiative !
I just rolled. I have a D12 for my dex. I rolled a 10 on it, and then I rolled a 1 on the D20.
Oh.
I almost did as bad. I got a 2 on my 20 and an 11 on my dex.
So yeah, I got an 11. Michael got higher.
Highest?
What'd you get, Chad?
19.
Boom. And so that would be initiative. Chad goes first, then Jake, then Michael, and then in the table order, if the GM basically would act as the monsters. So whatever order they're in.
I like it.
And it just keeps it super simple.
I think Hank uses a round the table initiative too.
Oh, does he?
But his is I think it's like turn based from start to finish.
Oh, I see.
I think so.
Right, I see what you mean.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I keep recognizing. I know you're not like modularly grabbing pieces from other systems, but there's clearly parallels to other systems. But a lot of uniqueness.
Well, and I would say, well, first of all, thank you. Second of all, point out as much of that as you can, because I would rather a friendly face does it than a stranger on the internet.
Well, so I'll just point this out. I think you've done it in a unique way, but assigning the dice to the stats is how Kids on Bikes RPG does it.
No way.
Yeah. But I think...
Are you serious?
Their archetypes, though, dictate who gets what. You don't get to choose where they go unless you build your own archetype.
Huh. Do you roll it with a D20?
No. I think what they did though is the D20 is one of the dice you assign. I'm trying to find where their archetypes are.
Yeah, so here's there's two 10s, right?
There are two 10s, and
they only use one 10.
Gotcha. And can I tell you from a design standpoint why we didn't do that? That D20 is super swingy. That is crazy. You can roll a 20 or a 1.
Yeah.
Versus a 1 through a 12. So like we were doing the math and I was doing some play testing, and having a D20 for one of the abilities was either super powered or it could whiff. So we thought of the idea of rolling them together and then took the core math and was like, well, wait, this is a point buy.
So just real quick, they have D20 is superb, D12 is impressive, D10 is above average, D8 is below average, D6 is bad, D4 is terrible. So then you have your stats are, they don't fit like into the static amount is the dice type. And then you have these things called flight, charm, brains, grit, brawn, and fight that are moved accordingly based on a laid back slacker is going to have a flight that's a D20 and a fight that's a D4. But the
I see.
The bully is going to have a fight that's the D20 and the flight that's a D4. So it's not I don't think you can draw a direct parallel. I think all the similarity that I see is you're using dice assigned to stats, but you're using it in a completely different way.
Yeah.
And it's not a static way like they're doing. It's just very similar, and I'd be remiss if I didn't at least point it out.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest bummer, because that was one of the things that I was most excited about. Not that it matters, but overall I was like, hey, I've never seen anybody do it quite this way. Then Matt was like, dude, Savage Worlds does it that way. And I was like, oh, yeah. So
I don't feel so bad. I was about to feel like I just pulled a big old hat.
No. He totally popped my balloon earlier and said no, but he said one of the things that you did do. And here's the thing that I loved was by pairing it, because Savage Worlds is a little swingy too. That's why they do the exploding dice.
Yeah, I think Kids on Bikes does exploding dice too.
Gotcha. And those kinds of systems really do well with that, because that's how you get the other dice to behave like a D20.
Yeah.
It's how you get the other ones jumped up. So the thing that seemed to work really well is the math of this. But my favorite thing about the way that we're choosing to do it as of now versus that is that no two characters are the same. You could play a ninja and say, no, I want to be a big, brawly, oafish ninja. It's not, no, you're a ninja. You get a D6. It's slide them around. Right. Yep. And so I love that because it still makes me feel like I'm making a character.
Yeah, it's like building a dex-based paladin or a strength-based rogue.
Correct.
kind of thing. So
I love that element being in there, but I'm glad. And honestly, and the same goes for all three of you. And if there's something where you're like, hey, this is exactly like this game, what I would also love is like, hey, but you know what I think would be better? Or, you know, what I don't like about that is this, and so on. So,
well, have you thought of the so could leveling be that you get to replace a dice? So right now my wisdom is at 4. If I level up, I can go take another 6 and put it on my wisdom if I want.
Currently, that was the running theory for how to level. My problem with that was, and it's not a big problem, it's a little one, which is you would need 2 sets of dice or 3 sets of, what if you had 4d6? It could get weird. I guess you could always write it down. Really, it's the answer. But so yeah, never mind. I just answered my you don't have to put the dice on the paper.
What if because more and more dice sets, you either have extra D6s or like these sets that Wizards been putting out that have 4 D6s come with the set.
Yeah, rogue style.
So what if instead of just assigning any, when you level up, you get 1 D6 that you can add to a stat?
Ooh.
Yeah, because everyone has D6s sitting around. That's a good idea. I like that.
I like that. So you get to roll it with it?
Yeah, so strength is a D4. So maybe now it's a D4 and a D6. You're not making that a 10, you're making that a 2 to a 10 instead of a 1 to a 4.
I'm digging it. I like that.
It's just, I mean, I can see some pros and cons to that, but D6s plus ability score increases like in D&D only happen like every 4th level, except for certain characters. So it's not like every level you're going to get, oh, now I got like 66s and everything's super. But it's just like, okay, cool. I reached this milestone. Now I have 1 D6. What do I want to be better at? You know, and then it goes into that. Do I want it to be in my core power, or hey, I've really done a lot of stuff that makes it cool for me to have grown stronger physically. There's a lot of options with it.
Yeah, I like that. And you're right, because then it's not robbing from one or the other. It's like, no, you're good.
Yeah, just a thought.
I like the idea that you have to step up first. So if you're at a D4, you have to go to a D6. You have to go all the way to D12 before you can add a second dice at a D4, and then you can incrementally.
Oh, I see. So let me put that as a note. So incremental. So go through.
So you're 12. You might be able to start with adding a D6 or a D4 or something else to it. But your other stats, if you want to increase those, you have to increase them up to a D12 before you can add another dice to it.
I see what you're saying. So you can't sort of hack the system and be like, I'm going to put my D4 here because in a couple levels it's going to be a D8. Like essentially, like I get what you're saying. Yeah, that's cool. I made notes of both of those things, and I think they're really good ideas. And so I think Versal was in front of you, and he sort of has been revealed. And in 5-minute RPG fashion, this is where the boss meter go. This is where all the successes and the failures would appear. And so he actually he wisps into the cloud.
I'm sorry. You said that, I immediately thought, wait, he's digital?
He uploads himself.
Sorry, that's my day job. I work in metadata.
He uploads himself. He pushes his Apple Watch. This is push pay.
Who was it? That would have been applicable if Joe was here tonight. Joe was the one that was going to be.
I forgot. Oh my God.
Oh man.
He was going to be Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
He goes.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I think we determined that Chad's at the top of the initiative order.
Yes.
I don't have that fancy power to fly away, but I would charge into this clearing in the smoke, into this, what was like a ruined building, I think, that he flew through.
Yeah, so essentially just imagine the landscape being like a suburb that's been destroyed. So fiery homes, streets that are crushed, flipped cars, that sort of thing.
And I would obviously release Boomer's dismembered arms.
can use them as a weapon.
I like that you felt the need to explain that to us.
He
Don't
holsters
include them in my
them.
inventory. Yeah, don't include them.
You have two arms hanging on your sides like holstered pistols. It's like, and he pulls them out and you're like shaking them at first. I don't even know.
Watch out. He's armed and dangerous. Somebody's got to be that guy.
That was awesome. That was low-lying fruit that needed to be picked or it would have gone wrong.
You could chastise him too. You could like wave your hand at him.
Give him a
How
finger
dare
wag.
you?
So you throw those, you drop those two arms and they sort of fall. And then are you going to attempt to follow him in? Or are you going to run and hide? What are you going to do?
No, I'm gonna charge into the clearing. The smoke whisked away, right? And then he was there. I saw his image. So even though he's gone, I gotta try and follow where
you do so. And as you charge into the clearing, he's standing there waiting for you. He's sort of, pushing up the sleeves on what's left of his ripped spandex. Sort of. I see they sent rookies. And he immediately just starts blasting you with eye rays, just trying to.
Do I get a reaction to that?
Yeah, so the idea here is that it's similar to like a save. So go ahead and try, and I'm just trying this out because, go ahead and roll. It would be like Dex or Con if you're like super beefy and you want to just like take it.
Yeah, he wants to try to put his hands up where he doesn't wear gloves and try to absorb this kinetic energy.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's turn this into a power roll. I'll let you do that at a 15.
Okay, I got a 17.
Boom. So he's like, and these red, beams are shooting, and you lift up your hands, and to his surprise, he leans in and pushes harder, and you're like, and you're sort of absorbing this. And what I'm going to let you do is I will let you roll your next power roll. When you want to release that, I'll let you roll that, which in this game is basically our word for advantage. It's lucky. So I'll let you roll that lucky. And lucky means you get to re-roll the ability die and take the higher number.
All right. Thank you.
So you're like, and so as you see this, so is there anything else you want to do on your turn?
It would just kind of like singe and steam up, and it would just go into his palms. And I guess are they continuing? He hasn't really noticed. Is it continuously blasting?
Yeah, he's just he hasn't noticed. He's expecting when the beams stop and the smoke starts to clear, he expects you to be dead.
Behind if anyone can see it, there's just a smile on his face, and he's just holding still.
Yeah, he's giving you all kinds of energy. So, Prism. Oh, you're muted.
2 questions.
Sure.
What time of day is it?
I was thinking it's probably like sundown. So there's still a little like waning light, probably like sunset.
And what time of year is it?
We'll call it nowish. So
Okay.
like September.
Okay. There was like 1/12, I guess, of a chance that it was going to be around Christmas time.
It could be around Christmas. It's around Christmas time.
No, okay. I was just going to try something with some lights.
Yeah, there's actually the neighborhood has been decked out for the Christmas festival because they were doing this whole thing because you know how they do in Hastings.
Okay.
And so there's all kinds of stuff. There's twisted like reindeer that have been all wrapped up, big waving Santa Claus. That's the plural I made up for Santa Claus.
So in the last part, in my last action, I had kind of run up on him in my motorcycle.
Yeah.
And as Temper is just absorbing this attack, I'm looking around and I see where along Main Street, they're still lit up. I see the lights that kind of come up along the side. They go up and start going from light pole to light pole to light pole with the holiday lighting and candy canes and stuff. And just this one section, most of the others on the other side of the street are just decimated. This one section of lights is still lit. And I'm going to race by on my bike, grabbing at the strand of lights. And I picture just this grabbing it, and it just starts doing that as I'm grabbing hold of it. But as I'm doing it, it's also, you would see, I'm going to use my light absorption power to directly try to pull the light. So you'd see the strand just kind of surging and just, and this is the first point where I think my costume would come into play, where it has this kind of black and white look to it.
Right.
But it's also like those stupid shirts that my daughter always wants, where you can like swipe up or down.
Oh, yeah.
And as this light energy comes in, all of these tiny little like sequin things just start going, and they act as light refractors. So at this point, I imagine if this works, I'm going to start to look a bit like a Christmas disco ball.
Yeah.
Trying
100%.
to just draw all this energy in. So I don't know what part you want to be the test, the grabbing the lights, using the superpower. To me, it feels like that part of the absorption is like the low level power ability.
Sure.
And it's more about, pardon me while I GM for you.
Please. No, it's a playtest. No, like, come on.
It feels like it feels to me like the real effort here is, again, I'm trying to control my bike and do this dexterous maneuver to grab hold of this thing while absorbing the power. So I don't know if it's a power check with a higher difficulty or a dex check.
Sure. And so here, this brings up a question because, playtest, right? So the thing is, when it's that narrative specific to you, because no one else could do that. So to me, does that fall under the purview of, that's not just superhero, that's your specialty? Maybe. Right. So because and this is just from my seat as a GM, you just narrated that amazing thing to me. I hate it when that goes south and just turns sour on a missed dex check. And then you're tangled up in the lights, and then it's like, no one tells that story. So what I'm thinking is, because if you can convince me as a player, which I think you have, like, yo, man, I'm doing a superhero thing. This is my thing. I'm like, cool, I'll let you slide that under powers, which can't necessarily fail. It's just a matter of how well can they succeed. To a degree where it's like you could still, so in this case, maybe power success at a cost means you get a failure towards the scene if this is a key. Right? So in this idea, I would say probably not a dex for me, although that wouldn't be wrong. So here's what I want to do. We're going to do an A/B test. First, I want you to do it as a dex check. No, power. Do first power, then we'll do dex, because I want to see how it feels and how it shakes out.
So yeah, okay. So as a power, with con being my ability tied to my power, I got a total of 10.
Okay. In this scenario, what would be different, the reason why a power is different is because you can't really fail at using a power, meaning you still do all that cool stuff. It's just that the effect might not be what you wanted. So the 10 would still be success at a cost. So what I would let you do is I'd say, you may choose to have that succeed. This is a key. It will also give you a failure in the scene. So you're going to get a success and a failure. Do you want to do that? And then you'd say yay or nay. Or I want to bank them, or I falter, or I wait. I bank the points and I'm going to wait. I'm going to draw back and wait or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How does that feel?
I like it in the context of what you explained. It kind of runs into something we talked about very early on, though, where my power check feels no different than a regular con check.
Gotcha. So the idea though is that
other than you're mitigating it by saying it can't fail per se.
That's kind of the thing that.
So it's like saying, so I'm just curious. I want to see what I would have gotten with a dex check.
Yeah, let's do that too. I want to do that too.
It was a 6. It's still coming down to the fickle D20.
What if when you use your power, you automatically get 5 points? So it can't be a failure because you have 5, and then you add that to.
So let's just roll with that then, and say, so I either have to choose to carry out the action I was attempting to do and take the failure, or I can sort of just let it go.
Maybe. I mean, I made that up, but yeah.
So,
or maybe no, maybe that's the risk, is that if you only get that high, it's like, no, sorry, you do it, but you can't go back. You can't bank. You can't.
Yeah, it's kind of like if with D&D, if there's certain things that if you try to cast a spell, it fails and you lose the spell slot.
Right. And so in this case, it's like you tried to do all that.
So here's how I would do this narratively. Let's just say we didn't meta interrupt. And that's my result. The first thing that comes to mind is I'm doing it. I'm grabbing this thing. The light is going. And I'm turning already as the sparkles and the multicolors of the Christmas lights are starting to almost like just arc across these panels on my costume, my super suit. Yeah. And I shift my focus towards Versal and Temper. And I don't see the wrecked car that emerges from the smoke until I look back and it's too late. I slam on the brakes, do another skid, crash into the barrier, not hard enough to do any significant damage to myself, but it kind of like, and when I crash, there's just this brilliant, it looks like a piñata of light just went off. And my ability, all of the light that I absorbed just dissipated because I lost concentration when I smashed into the.
I love that.
Into the thing, and that would be my way of saying, I don't want to take the complete failure, if that makes sense.
Sure, and so I think too that maybe what's changed from the first playtest we ran is that before. Okay, let's say this. Let's say you do. Outside of 5-minute RPG, let's say you were doing an intelligence check or a history, like, whatever. History Arcana. You roll, you either fail or you succeed. I think that should still come into play, and I maybe am getting stuck on stupid about that part, meaning you have every intent of doing that. So when you roll and you get that number, I say, unless you have anything that can jump that up, like banked points or whatever, awesome. Yeah, you succeed. And then I, as the GM, narrate the cost. Or I can throw it to you. But it happens and there's a cost. And maybe to me, I think the thing that I'm throwing in there, which is sort of this weird middle thing, is I'm making it so that after you've already decided to do the action, you roll for the action. I'm like, but do you really want to? And it's like, no, you've already decided to do that.
Yeah.
You roll. Okay, you succeed and at a cost. So you do all that you did. And then here's my suggestion for a cost. Do you have one? Or something like that. So that it happens, but then something bad also happens.
Well, and that also goes back to what I said earlier. A 5 and a 10 are always a failure.
Correct.
And a 10 or 15 and a 20 are always a success.
Right. Well, theoretically. So,
right. Just kind of thinking at that point.
Sure. Right. Like, yeah. I see what you're saying. At a high level, it's still a failure.
Well, and in the context of this story, we're the B team.
Right.
We're the defenders suddenly coming in, playing with the big boys, and maybe a little out of our league. And maybe, because I was too caught up in what I was doing and I lost my stored energy, that's a failure.
And this brings up a really good point. So design-wise, the reason why it is success at a cost is because we at least found in early playtesting, the narrative felt really good to do what you did to yourself earlier. Whereas it's like, it felt really good to go, oh, I barely make it, but my gun falls, or I get stabbed, or you barely, you get it. So the narrative pushes forward because, again, taking away, especially if this is a party game, I say party game, if it's a game where you sit down with a group of people and like, yeah, let's play. What you don't want is 5 turns in to fail fully. I do nothing on my turn, literally. I just narrated, I rolled, and farts, you know? Rather than that, you're like, oh man, okay, guys, I was able to get the success against Versal, but it cost me hit points, or it cost me my bike, or you know what I mean? Narratively, that felt really good. And I'm probably just doing a bad job of GMing it. Because I got so much going on in my head, and I'm asking so many questions.
I like the way you just put that there. Because you in my head, you flipped the whole thing. It's a success, but with a personal cost.
I like that.
So in
Change
this
that
sense,
language.
instead of losing the light absorption, which does really hurt us as a party, maybe that cost is I just wrecked my bike. The bike that I've been using in every time it's the camera cuts to me, I'm on my bike. Now I just lost that because I wasn't paying attention. And it's going to be harder for me. I don't have super speed or anything like that. So it's going to be harder for me to maneuver on foot.
Right. And doesn't that like scratch an itch narratively as a player?
Yeah. So I like that. I like that. It's just like I said, flipping my thinking. So now I've hurt myself. So yeah, retcon, I still have the dazzling lights in my suit, but my bike is trashed.
Yeah.
And my turn ends right there because I just wiped out.
And you go rolling, and it's just like, it looks seriously like Disco Vietnam. Like,
that's where the dubstep kicks in.
So from a character sheet perspective, I can't help but think about, okay, I've got 3, 5, I don't know, personal things that I could lose at a cost. And so now one of them was just checked off.
Yeah, I like it.
And I have to go to the shop to get it fixed in order to put it back on my character sheet. So that makes it very mechanical and easy to track, but then you can build a narrative in saying, yeah, this is specifically what happened.
And it can be kind of cool. Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
Well, I guess just another thing I've been thinking of is that kind of what I've experienced so far from the GM side. It feels like, okay, it's quick and easy as a player maybe, but how challenging is it going to be for a new group of players with a new GM to pick up this system and just run with it if they have to make a lot of these narrative choices? I guess that's just
it's a really good question. And that's why I want to feed them with enough stuff on cards or on the sheet so that experienced players can, a great example is bonds, flaws, traits, and ideals. I know, for me, I just typically don't use that stuff because I kind of get just an idea of the character in my head, but it's really helpful stuff. That style of thing where if you are a ninja sword master, I will give you 3 things that could be at a cost, the final thing being your sword. Yeah. That sort of thing. And maybe it's something that you and the GM work out where you're like, hey, this was I biffed it so hard right now that I'm going to lose my sword first. So I think to what you're saying, spot on, very, very good call. And Jake, what I would probably do is it would say success at a cost. And then the brief single line description would be, this is typically a personal cost that will be directly related to your character, though sometimes it can be other things related to the scene or others. So that it's like, hey, boilerplate, it's you wreck your bike. But in a certain scenario, it could be, you mess up someone else's thing or whatever, if it works narratively. So I think that's kind of cool. I think we made some progress there design-wise. Does that feel pretty good?
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of when Tony Stark let his guard down and Obadiah showed up and he lost the thing most important to his existence, his arc reactor.
Correct.
And it was a struggle for him to get to a replacement.
Right.
And you know, that set him back narratively in a lot of ways and gave Obadiah the upper hand. So I know a lot more about comics, more from comic movies, but more about comics than I let on.
Still counts.
All right. I do believe it's Michael's turn.
It is. Michael has waited patiently, but
no, this is good. This is good.
It's now your turn.
Well, I guess what I've been picturing is that while Prism and Temper are charging on Versal here, I'm going to like leap, like if he's attacking Prism head on, I imagine Temper coming off on a flank and attacking and crash the bikes, and I'm going to go on the other flank like a big hop and then a jump and like do a kick or I'm trying to think of the martial arts term, but just my legs out straight and just like trying to slam right into him with my feet.
We either call it doing a karate,
doing a karate,
or we call it a Liu Kang, where it's like those are the two technical terms. I don't want to get jargony on you.
Well, I'm thinking of Dex.
Yeah, definitely. If you're going like martial arts and stuff, I would say
yeah. And so that's my high one. And so I'm doing a 12 here. Oh shit! I still rolled bad. It's a 10, but I've got a 5 personal banked here.
Oh, you banked. Okay, good. This is
so I'm going to take that bank, and so I'm going to do a 15. So it's just a straight success.
Perfect. And that's one of the economies we have to dial in is that because right now you banked one and got one. And what I was saying is I don't know if it should just be for the group pool that these economies are, but I like the idea that it's like double. If you're going to store them, I mean, I'm going to let you use it, but I like the idea that, and we have to figure that out.
I got to store 2 of them.
Maybe. Because then you have to think twice, but I also don't want to discourage people from banking them, but I also want to make it so that you can't just have fat stacks and just write your own checks whenever you want.
Sure, that's a good point.
Right, so figuring that economy out is going to be good. But all right, but I will let you do that. So what does it feel like to kick Superman, Versal in the jaw?
Well, I think he's so intent on Prism and or a Temper trying to char him down with his hands or his eyeballs that he's not really paying attention. And I like do a hop and then a slam right into him from the side, and and so it just kind of caught off guard, and maybe the raise his eye raise, cut off, and he takes a step or two.
Absolutely.
But I think he'd still like turn around and like dust off his chest or something, and I'd be like rolling, trying to get my feet.
And so as you do that, and you kick him, and as you said, his head sort of turns, and you can see as the beams leave, off of Temper, you can kind of see that smoke rising and the grin being there is the smoke kind of curls up around it. And so this brings up something that we haven't run into yet. And we'll wrap it up here shortly, but some monsters have what our equivalent would be to resistances, meaning, and this to me is the best way to handle something very simple at a high level of what happens if you kick Superman in the face, right? Is like, oh, well, no, I got a 20, so it hurts him. It's like, you're not Doomsday, but so the idea here is, because you're a superhero, it would probably work fine, but this is how you keep the janitor we've been talking about, who is actually, I think, probably the supervillain, really. But that janitor is, you put certain successes cannot be used against a creature. So, and I have words written in a doc somewhere. Our version of it would be resistances and then vulnerability, sort of. So meaning, so let's use an ogre. An ogre it would cost double to get a strength success on an ogre, but it would be worth double to get an intelligence success on them, if that makes sense. And so having very, very simple resistances where it's like, if you kick Superman in the jaw, it takes 2 successes to get 1 success. You can still do it, but that's a simple way of doing it. And then that way too, if you have kryptonite, that's an easy way to make it weak. No, I have kryptonite, so I double my successes against Superman. Does that all make sense? Oh, you're muted again.
What would a double success be? Would it have been a 20 or would it have been a 30?
Right.
Technically, so I could have gotten 30 if I used my 12.
So so that would have been a double success. Yes.
Would have been a 30.
Basically 20 plus. Yes. Okay. And the number on the scale, it just says 20 plus. So even a 21, you get a success and a benefit. Basically, it makes it so, and this is a little loose as far as the exact, but it's like how, yeah, you can hit the dragon, but because of your level, you have to get a crit. It's mimicking that where it's like, yeah, you can kick Superman in the jaw, but because of your power level, you have to get really lucky and have a ton of skill to actually make it do something. And so the idea is that as a resistance, they sort of ignore the first success if you try to do a strength thing against them or a, intelligence thing if it's a lich and that sort of thing. So that's something we're tinkering with so that, again, there's just a slight layer. It's not too deep, but it's like, oh man, yeah, that way there's variances and an ogre doesn't feel like you're fighting a lich.
Well, and at a party game, if somebody rolls a 30, you want them to be able to just,
yes,
to feel awesome.
Correct. And so that would be like what success and a benefit. So boom, you crank it out. So yes. And I was going to let you hit anyway, just because, playtest and everything. But so as you do that, now we're not going to get into this exactly now. This brings up the point of hit points. And do successes in a scene act as high-level hit points for the world? And as of now, that's kind of how it is. So you could even cordon off, oh, hey, listen, after 3 successes, the minions die. But then that's not scalable and perfect because what if you guys aren't fighting the minions? After 3 successes, do they run away? So it's kind of like what I'm trying to avoid, to give you an idea, is that if I sit down to run this, I don't want to have to stat out everything on the board. And so these high-level scene hit points is really what they are, is kind of the idea. So it's like, oh, hey, after you do 3 successes, the minions, they and you can come up with different reasons. They leave for some reason, or they are defeated, or they're routed. They get afraid. They've never seen Versal kicked in the jaw. And this is where DMing comes into play. They've never seen Versal kicked in the jaw, and they're terrified, and they scatter. So that kind of thing. So anyway, the reason why I'm telling you this is because usually when players hit things, they want to hear how many hit points they do. And I don't have an answer for you for that, other than you get a success because this is a key point of the scene.
Well, and that also removes all of the baggage of damage.
Correct.
I mean, good or bad. I mean, maybe you're a rules nerd and you love all that stuff, but...
And there will be a simple way to add that on. That's something that, again, would be a very easy alternate rule. Yep. And so right now, there are standing rules for your health. See, the other thing that like D&D unlocked for me is players and monsters aren't symmetrical. They're not designed to be symmetrical. So you don't design a player and a monster and they use the same thing. If you look at the way a player works versus a monster. So in fact, it's Versal's turn. So let's use this as an example. So Michael, you're the closest. So Versal is going to try to punch you in the face. And so the way that monsters are now, to keep it simple, their challenge level is their die type. So Versal rolls a d12 for everything. So you don't have to stat out a whole monster. He just rolls a d12, and that's it. The other thing that we're doing with monsters is what they do succeeds unless you make it not succeed. So rather than Versal just straight rolling a strength check, I would say Versal punches you. You roll to make that not happen.
Okay. I would say that
that's kind of what we're playing with. That's kind of the idea. We'll see how that goes, because then the players get to do all the rolling.
Okay. I would say I'm trying to make the air around his fist, super dense, and so he's having to punch through this. And so again, I would say it's an intelligence, like
Perfect.
I'm doing a spell to.
Right. Now, while you do that, I am simultaneously going to try something out. I'm going to do an opposed roll, like a strength versus strength thing, where I'm going to roll my power just to see how that feels. Okay. So he rolls a 15. So I don't know. I don't know if I think maybe having an opposed roll could be cool, where the monster, because it's one die, you don't have to have all this stuff. And what's my attack? It's like, no, look, this is a D4 monster. I roll a D4 and a D20. We oppose. Do they succeed? I don't know. We'll figure that out. I also think maybe that could be split into two, where there are automatics. So like this is his special attack, where it happens unless you make it not like a saving throw, but not every attack is that. So, this is pretty milky what I'm saying here, but the idea is that for the sake of it, let's say he punches you. Okay. Here's how we're handling hit points as of this moment. Your number of hit points is the max number on your con die. Okay. The way you take hit points, you roll your con die.
Okay. So I roll my con.
Yep.
I got an 8.
Okay. Here's what happens. Here's what happens. You now have 0 health, but the way that you lose health now is 1 die at a time comes off your sheet, starting with the D4.
Okay.
When you have no dice left, you're unconscious.
Okay. Well, I rolled an 8 on a 10-sided dice. So
perfect. Got it. Oh, sorry. I just assumed it was a D8. But does that make sense?
Actually, let's switch those just to play this out, because I kind of like the idea of he just obliterated me, and so I don't have that con dice anymore.
Here's what happens. In this, they're not hit points. We're basically calling it vitality or health, whatever. And it's taking the explanation you hear of hit points, and there's like, well, no, it's not really hit points. It's like your general vigor. And it's like, we're going to just take that a step further and say, no, it's called your vitality or your health, whatever it is. Your con equals that number, and it acts more like armor. Right? So the idea is that you now have 0, we'll call it vitality.
Sure.
Now you are vulnerable, and every time you take a hit hereafter, you lose 1 die, starting from the D4, then the D6, then the D8, then the 2 D10s, and when you lose your D12, you're unconscious. And Jeff Doty made a really good point when we were playtesting it. He said, that's really good, because what that represents is if someone's if they're whooped, their D4 is the thing they're worst at. He's like, that would be the first thing to go.
Yeah.
Like, you're just tanked. So this is kind of an interesting way to do hit points, but it felt really good because you get the gamble of the roll. So there were a lot of these tension moments of like, oh, like just what happened to you. But you understand and clearly see, okay, hey, I got about 6 more hits in me before I'm toast. So it also, even if you roll the worst, you're still only about halfway there. So it's kind of this good buffer, but it's still kind of because you could just roll and it can be a 1. And I loved that. That's how it could be. You could either get stabbed and it nicks an organ, or it could just go through some fleshy tissue and you're like, oh my gosh, or it grazes you. You know what I mean? So how does all that feel to you guys?
I really like it. I like I don't know why, but I'm really liking that I have these 6 dice arrayed on my character sheet. And you've added to that when I start to die, or become vulnerable, there's that visceral component that I'm moving these off of the sheet, and now there's an empty circle there.
Right.
Oh crap.
Right.
So yeah, I dig it.
Cool. And it's what you'd expect. You can still make those rolls, just flat D20.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think it's
Groovy.
synergies with the idea I had with leveling, because you could have a D4 on multiple stats. So you could have like a D12 plus a D4, and then over here have a D4, and you get to choose. Do I want to lose?
Oh,
this
sure. Where you're like,
D4
yeah,
over?
sure. It does. That would click. And to me, that would be a good campaign rule. That's exactly what I'm saying. Like, that's a hack where that's right there in the book under the DM section or the 5M section. Hey, here's a way to add a little crunch and some danger, like what you're saying. Yeah, that's killer. So Mike, Versal just clobbered you, and so you sort of go flying back. But listen, you kick Superman in the face and gave him a bruise, which is not really. I gotta stop saying Superman. DC's gonna tag this video cease and desist. No. No, but so Versal, you kicked him. And so what we'll do is, I guess we'll go one more round through, do whatever you want to do to try to test or break the system, and then we'll end it there. So Chad, you see the beams turned off of you as, this spry bouncing hero just cracks Versal right in the jaw.
I'm gonna try and use my power to use it all to become as big as he can with it.
Yeah.
And then try and grab him by the arms and
Awesome.
start bowling.
So narratively, what I would think would be cool is I'm going to let you remember you have that extra die you can roll. Okay. So we're going to A/B test. Let's do the D6 idea that Jake had first, and let's see how that pans out. I think that should work because that's a common mechanic in D&D, like the Bardic dice, or even we've used it in like spheroids for Harbinger. So a D6 is a good sort of, on an average, you're going to get about 3, which could be awesome. So let's try that first. You got lucky.
Add a D6.
Yeah, add a D6 to
My D12.
Yes.
Plus my D20.
Correct.
All right.
Right?
I like it.
22.
Boom. That's not a bad number. Can you do me a favor and just roll it again?
Okay. With the same exact.
Yeah.
Ooh, even better. No, 23. Yeah, 23.
So not bad, right? Now that's not super scientific, but the idea is that it wasn't super swingy either. I like that because it's the same reason we made it so that you get a free move in this game. We want people to feel cool. You can always scale that stuff back, but how fun is it to grab a D20, a D12, and a D6 and roll it? I just think that feels good.
Nice number.
So yeah, and it's in this perfect pivotal moment. So now you have, and on the scale, that is success with a benefit. So what you're able to do is, in this case, the benefit is going to be, I'm going to give you some pretty free narrative liberties to explain to me what happens as you are able to wrestle Versal down to the ground.
I think
or overpower him, whatever that looks like.
I think he turned and punched my colleague, and so I got behind him and I grabbed his arms from behind, and I'm bigger than him, and I put a knee into his back and I got him down to his knees and I'm holding him, and I think my benefit will maybe be a grapple kind of element, maybe.
Sure.
And so I'm holding him and I'm pulling, and I got him there for everyone else to do what they're gonna do. But I see him get hit, but maybe I don't know that he's what his state is, because I just see him probably go flying. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And so Prism.
Seeing that Temper has Versal pinned, kind of chicken winged or whatever you call it, arms pulled back, pinned back, and my bike's trashed, so I'm just gonna pick myself up and start sprinting, and I don't have super speed, but it almost looks like I do because of the way this light is refracting all through the smoke and everything as this disco ball comes careening towards him. But I'm not going to run all the way up to him because temper is actually shielded by Versal. And I'm going to attempt a thing, and I'm just going to, since we're kind of playtesting and stuff, I'm going to just say that this is an ability that my suit has. I'm going to send all of these shards of mini prisms of these sequins off of my suit.
Yes.
Like a light show blast of a disco light fragmentation grenade kind of thing.
I love that.
I'm just going to literally do this as I run up, skid, and just.
Dude, I love that. Can we call it the Murder Liberace? And so
it's the Liberace Death Blossom. There you go. One of my favorite movies, The Last Starfighter.
You do the Liberace Death Blossom. And so as these, I imagine that your suit is designed to, I don't know how and why, but I feel like these crystals eventually like sort of like come back to you. But I like the idea that you charge them sort of like there's one of the X-Men is named Gambit, and he charges.
It's like Gambit. First you charge the card, then you throw the card.
So you're like. So
I watched the X-Men cartoon in the 80s.
It's
90s.
So good. Yeah, 90s, early 90s. I'm going to say that that is now canonically the animation that this game is looking like in my head. So, as these prisms, these like little shards, like do that. Let's talk through. This is again maybe where like this is a power. But if I make it so that powers can't fail, what would stop people from always using their powers? And I guess that's the GM. And they're like, well, it encourages you to use your power. Like if you're a sword fighter, you use your sword. You know what I mean? Like it encourages you to narratively do your thing. But I don't know. That's something we need to figure out. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think I'm going to make this a power roll because it would suck if you just narrated all that and you fail a con and then it doesn't happen. So power roll, and I will make this you want to do a 15 or a 20? Because maybe that's how you do powers. It's like, yeah, I'll let you do it, but it's going to cost this much. So it's more of like, I give you the price.
There's always that risk that it's that success at a cost.
Right.
Let's just see what happens. We haven't done a 20 yet. So
let's do it. 20 Liberace.
And my coward power die is a D10.
Okay.
So I do have a chance to blow past this.
Let's do it.
That's an 18.
Okay, so this is a perfect example of we're going to create this fictional thing. We have been playing. It's been a full session. Hey, why don't you use the table pool? This is the exact reason why this worked so well when we playtested this at AtCon. People were banking and putting like 5 in here and there. This is the moment where in most games, the whole table's like, yeah, use the pool. So we're going to say that there's a fictional pool and you now have an extra 5 points.
So, and I would want to narrate that too, just that as I begin to do this, charging this up to do this burst, that the nearby Christmas display, a street lamp, it looks like Dumbledore with his put-outer, lights just start going and then and it's just this brilliant Liberace Death Blossom, dibs on the band name, as it just blasts out all these shards and they just begin ripping into Versal. Some of them are flying and chipping away at a car or building, and there's Temper behind him with these, this blast going past, maybe a couple nick his shoulder or something. Sorry, I don't know about. I don't know how well protected Vibe is laying on the ground there, but yeah. So that's kind of the narrative visual of the. One more time, Liberace Death Blossom.
Liberace Death Blossom. And so as that occurs, what you would see is Vibe. You see all this sort of happening, and you're definitely strong enough that you've sort of bounced back up, and you can see there's actually this, we're just going to make it for the sake of the narrative. This attack has blown away most of Versal's super suit. And so you have him pinned back as, the tensile muscles of Temper are just holding him in place as he's writhing and pushing. He's just been blown away. And you see this crystal that has become exposed on his chest. And this is rumored to be the source of his powers, and also the thing that would probably need to be destroyed or pried off him to stop him. And you are the last hope. So the crystal is there. You are on the ground and you see it. What do you do?
Oh shit.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Your first online game, so I figured I would just make it easy.
Let's see. Well, I guess I could attempt. This would have to be a hard roll to separate the air molecules in between his cavity and the crystal that's there, and try to pop it off of his body.
Done.
I mean,
I love it.
One of the things that thought me of, or I was thinking about when I was thinking my power, is I've always wondered if you could have a dome of silence, where you would, because sound travels through air. So if you could separate the air a bit and the sound couldn't get through that barrier. So that's kind of what I'm picturing here, is I'm popping it off with that barrier. So
that would be awesome. And then I was going to say, also do a power roll is what I was thinking, to try to master that.
Yeah, I'd say a 20 is definitely a desired roll here.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's a 10. Nice. 26.
Yeah. So
19 and a 7.
That's killer. Okay, perfect. So describe to me what it looks like as this crystal. Well, first, actually, there's a secret power. He has a gun that shoots sharks. No, I'm kidding. So he's like, pew, pew. And it's sharks that also have guns. No, I'm just kidding.
That shoot kittens.
Yeah. So, oh man. No, but so describe me what it looks like as this crystal pops off of his chest.
And so I would think that Vibe would get punched. He's falls back in the ground, and as the death blossom goes over his head, he stands up right behind it and concentrates on the air around him to pop this off, and this shard is just shaking and just all of a sudden just poof pops off, and it's clunk clunk clunk, and I almost would think that Verse would have this oh shit look on his face,
Absolutely. And as it does that, it sort of flies, and here's just this is your Tim Kearney ending, right? So this is just how I do things. So the crystal pops off and it flies and it sort of flips through the air and it lands squarely on the forehead of Boomer, whose undead eyes come awake and these crystalline arms come out of bloodied sockets. And he looks up and he says, I understand now. And he comes running towards you, and that's where we'll end it.
Nice.
Dope.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. I feel like we sort of hit a stride at the end and the system started to fall into the background, which I'm glad. But if you're cool with it, I wanted to just kind of give it to you all and do some final comments and anything you want to throw out there. I guess we can go left to right, my left to right. So it would be Chad first.
I loved it. I mean, there's obviously some room to add things to it. You could, you can always hack it or whatever or however you want to term it, to just, give it a fantasy skin or give it a, in this case, superhero skin and stuff like that. So that's really awesome. I love this. This character building process is just wicked to be able to just doop, 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 doop. All right, I want to be good at this. I don't mind if I suck at that. Where do I want to be at? So I really like it. I'm look forward to seeing it getting polished as it goes throughout its stages. And it's a pleasure to have been a part of that, and I thank you for that.
Killer. Thank you very much, man, for being a part. And so to speak to that, as far as being to reskin it and do those kinds of things, one of the things we want to have at its launch are several micro settings that would give you the things that we've kind of discussed for characters. And also we do want to have a solo mode and a co-op mode where maybe I'm not the GM and we use a deck of cards or specific cards, not just like playing cards, but like, this scene and this villain and this, event, or these are the keys, stuff like that. And some of those micro settings include like a modern horror, sort of like modern Lovecraft kind of thing. Superheroes. So this setting, just like a micro setting for this. We also talked about maybe even doing the pulp setting we were running. So like having some micro settings that would just be really easy to play out of the box so that you could reskin and hack, but you'd have all the guts. So you could just do it on the fly and go, hey guys, we're going to run a zombie apocalypse game. Here you go. Here's the book. Here's the cards. All right, let's start. Flip. Okay, here's the scene. That kind of thing is kind of how I envision play. So that's hopefully going to be something we can have when it launches. So cool, man. Jake, final thoughts, comments, ideas?
What a colossal waste of my night. No, seriously. I really like that coming in at this point where there's a really good skeletal foundation, but that it sounds like we were able to really kind of give you some good building blocks, some pros and cons, and strengthen that foundation. I definitely see this as something, I just posted the other day about this. I'm putting together my new quick on the go DM kit.
Yeah.
And this is something that I would definitely have in that kit.
Awesome.
I love the idea of being at a con where pickup games are happening all the time, but it can be hard to say, all right, let's play D&D or whatever, because everybody's got to get their stuff. I mean, that's probably the easiest one to do. But to say, guys, let's play a zombies on a spaceship game right now. Here's everything we need. And in 5 minutes, you guys are playing. You're throwing dice, and you're playing for as long as you want to play. Or the other scenario I see is what we can all relate to if you've played home games is when 2 or 3 people don't show up, or you're waiting for that guy that's always late. For us, that's almost always Mark. Mark is always late. We call him Butters.
Butters.
And so Butters is always late. So while we're waiting for Butters to show up, we go, hey guys, let's play some 5-minute RPG. What do you want to do? Somebody throw something out. All right, cool.
Totally.
Let's run it. So I'm very eager to see the system, to add it to my GM kit. And even though, we spent a lot more time on mechanical discussions and things like that, this was a fun scenario to play through. I mean, I've never been a superhero before, and I built a character and tried to play him sticking within that. And it wasn't until the opening scene that Prism had a motorcycle. I had no idea why.
Oh, for real? Oh, I love
seriously,
that.
He never had a motorcycle until it was actually because Chad was just sprinting into the scene, and you got Vibe over here doing his, so broom springing, and I'm like, I got nothing. I got a bike. That's what I got.
Yeah, dude, it was perfect.
So yeah, this was a lot of fun, both in terms of the meta aspects of it and just playing out the scenario.
Killer. Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that. And those two things that you spoke about are things that they are core design goals to be able to do exactly what you said. We were even calling like pickup games. Okay, you want to play a pickup game of like you said, like, hey, let's do this scenario. And then that makes me think of two things. One, we also wanted to have a generic deck that is just inspiration. So you could run it, and instead of it saying, the captain of the starship, it would be the leader, so that you could still have this sort of narrative guide that could be any genre. I also, when you were talking about the person who's late to the game, I thought it would also be cool to be able to go, hey, like if you just as a group, maybe you had been watching a show together, so you have all these references, it could be cool to just go, hey, let's do, like you mentioned before, like let's do a Transformers game. Come on, we've all been watching Transformers. Let's do a Transformers game. All right, cool. And being able to do that fast and just play for 15 minutes and have some fun, like that's really exciting to me as a player. To be able to go like, oh, let's do a Mega Man game. Come on, let's just do it.
What's those the nerd fights that always break out over who would win in a fight, Superman versus the Hulk? Let's find out. All right, put your money where your mouth is.
Right, and it's like, well, how would you stat it? Well, no, Hulk gets all D12s. All like, so yeah, exactly that. So
yeah,
man, and thank you. The feedback was fantastic, and so I appreciate it. And
also, Liberace Death Blossom.
Liberace Death Blossom. Man, I gotta find a way to put that into the can. That so quick. It also, you can do hilarious decks, like funny ones that are specifically like for that, like that are more on the Munchkin side, where it's like crazy stuff on purpose. So you could have a Liberace Death Blossom like item, like stuff like that is really fun. And you can, so lastly, and certainly not leastly, Michael.
I can be leastly. I like the idea of being able to build my character with dice, meaning add on to the stats with dice, because character building is my favorite part about RPGs. And so being able to pull out a second dice, whether it's a 6 or your next 4, or incrementing a dice up and being able to make that choice and go, how do I want to build up my character? My next my next opportunity is cool. I also like a lot of the hooks that kind of felt like they were falling into place where like a scene hooks, I don't know why I chose that word, where you as a content creator could insert a bunch of content to go along with a scene to help the GM or the players or whatever. So it felt very buildable from a creator standpoint, to very easily supply your own made up content. And then of course, as you found out, Tim, I'm an app developer, and so it feels very appable.
Good.
It does. It does feel, yeah.
That would be awesome, having everybody sit around with their iPads and have your character sheet on your iPad, and you can even set the dice on the iPad.
Yeah.
Like you could just set them right on top of the screen and like, do one of these. And so I'm like, I've got it like right on there.
Yeah.
Sliding stuff around and then ticking boxes and stuff. Yeah, I love that idea. The other thing that, like, we make adventure kits. So imagine like little micro ones and those sort of tables and like sight, sounds, sensations, which brings me to, you could totally use this for Oath or Shadows over Drift Chapel. Like you could do a 5-minute RPG, Oath of the Frozen King game, and have all those pieces. So it's exciting to kind of see like what 2019 is going to look like and having this kind of stuff. Cause there's no promises. We have a lot of other things we're working on, but our goal would be to start doing a formal sort of large scale play test and get this onto tables in 2019, hopefully like maybe even first quarter 2019, and get a copy of this rule set and say, break it, hack it. What do you think? And get that out there so that we could maybe release this next year. And that's cool. So thank you guys. I have one final question, which is, I wanted to wait and see how it went, see what the discussions were and how in depth we went. Do you guys have any issue with me making this video live?
None.
That's cool.
Cool. Because I mean, I am always sketchy. Like, I don't know. I don't know if people enjoy this or not, but then I think I would. If I was watching other people create a game, it would probably help me. So I will turn to this and say, if you are watching this, we made the video live. Feel free to comment with any of your thoughts and ideas under the pretense that if they're good, we'll probably use them. So don't comment if you don't want us to use your ideas. Like, feel free to enjoy it. But if you put an idea there, if it's a good one, that's awesome. And thank you. But this is probably the most stable the system has been, and it will only get better from here. In the future, you will be seeing a formal playtest of this game, hopefully soon. And until then, be sure to tune in. I know, is it Jake, the next Mitida, it's Monday the 1st. Is that Mike's first session?
Thursday is actually our next game on Mini Terrain Domain.
It's
Sunless Citadel. That's the Sunless Citadel mini campaign with DM Scotty and V, the Crafting Muse, Megan, and Jeremy Lilly. But yes, next Monday, October 1st, is the premiere of All That Glitters Waterdeep Dragon Heist, DM'd by Mike the Piper, on my channel, Mini Terrain Domain.
Yep. And so I would highly recommend it. You know, Jake's games are extremely fun to watch. They're just fun to watch. So I am a big fan of Mike too. He's an awesome game master who's probably one of the most thoughtful preppers that I know, maybe the most thoughtful prepper. So I'm really excited to see how he runs a heist and how he uses the book. So yeah, absolutely tune into that. And yeah, I guess that'll be it. And until next time, may your dice roll high.